Get out! My mother-in-law, Catherine's harsh voice pierced the air. When my husband was transferred abroad, she kicked me and my daughter out of the house. With no place to go, I ended up at the park, holding my 2-year-old daughter, feeling lost and unsure of what to do next. Suddenly, police officers surrounded us. "Please come with us," they said. Soaked in the rain and shivering from the cold, I followed them to the police station, where I found an unexpected person waiting for me. I'm Emma, turning 35 this year. I met my husband Bob at work, and after a year of dating, we got married. I quit my job when we tied the knot, and 2 years ago, our daughter Lily was born. Right now, we all live together with my mother-in-law, Catherine. We used to rent, but after Catherine's husband passed and her niece started acting up, we decided to buy a new apartment and live together. We thought about getting a house, but with Catherine's knee issues, we figured it'd be smarter to live where it's easy to get around. Buying an apartment was cheaper and had an elevator, which was a big help. Catherine liked the idea too, so we put money down and got a 35-year loan. Bob's job doesn't move us around much since we bought the place, but he still travels for work about once a week. With a 2-year-old, his trips stress me out. At first, Catherine pitched in with childcare, but now she's not much help. She leaves dishes dirty and utensils unwashed, which piles up extra work for me. When I ask her to help, she promises to do better but doesn't follow through. Oddly enough, she cleans up when Bob's around, and I just noticed that recently. At first, I didn't think much of it when Catherine occasionally rinsed the dishes, but now I see things differently. I suspect she's deliberately making things difficult for me, like when she offers to pick up things from the store, and then conveniently mentions afterward that she actually needed something. This happens a lot. I used to think Catherine's knee problems made moving hard for her, so I wanted to help out as much as possible. But now, my eagerness to assist is wearing thin. I considered talking to Bob about it, but he's already stressed from work, and I didn't want to add to his worries. Catherine's behavior started not long after we moved in together, and it's been going on for years. When I mentioned it to a friend, she said, "Sounds like she's bullying you. Why not talk to Bob? He might be able to help." But if I bring it up with Bob, Catherine, who doesn't have any other family, might end up in a care facility. So I thought maybe it's best to just tough it out. However, something happened one day that made me reconsider. That day, I had arranged to drop off Lily at my parents' house. They'd always loved having her over and often suggested I stay the night too. But I always worried about leaving Catherine alone. After a quick chat with my parents, I headed back to our apartment where Catherine was waiting. But when I got there, I realized I had forgotten the keys. At first, I panicked a bit, but then I remembered Catherine was home. I tried buzzing her through the intercom, but there was no answer. I waited outside, thinking she might have gone out, but she didn't return. As it got darker, I decided to follow another resident into the building. I was sure Catherine wouldn't be out so late, but when I buzzed our apartment again, there was still no response. I waited a while longer, but still nothing. Finally, I heard a faint sound from inside, confirming Catherine was home. I kept buzzing the intercom, but she wouldn't answer. Feeling defeated, I booked a room at a nearby motel for the night, planning to sort things out when Bob got back from his trip. I got locked out. I explained to Bob when he asked what happened. He was understandably upset, but Catherine just brushed it off, blaming her hearing and joking about getting old. Relieved to be back inside, I grabbed my keys and went to pick up Lily from my parents' house. They offered their support, saying I could always come back if things got too tough. Their comforting words brought tears to my eyes, but I quickly composed myself before heading home with Lily. For a while, things seemed okay with Catherine. Then, unexpectedly, Bob's international transfer was confirmed. A permanent move, not just a business trip. We just bought a place, and now this international assignment. What should we do? Bob asked me. I hesitated, considering the stress it might bring to Lily, but ultimately decided it was best for us to stay in the US. Soon after, Bob had to leave for Europe. Although he was concerned, work kept him occupied, leaving me, Lily, and Catherine to navigate life together. Living with Catherine took a turn for the worse once Bob left for Europe, just as I expected. Her attitude shifted drastically. On a stormy day, when it was unsafe to go outside, Catherine blindsided me with a shocking request. "Now that Bob's away, wouldn't it be best if you and Lily found somewhere else to live?" she said bluntly. "Excuse me? What are you saying?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I'd prefer to have the place to myself. I can't relax with strangers around. So if you could leave as soon as possible, that would be great," she replied, showing no remorse. I was stunned by Catherine's nerve. Despite not being blood-related, I had always treated her like family, doing my best to make our living situation comfortable. But to her, it seemed we were just unwanted guests. As I contemplated packing up and returning to my parents' house, Catherine's next words cut deep. "Why are you still here? Just leave already," she demanded, showing no mercy. Before I knew it, Lily and I were standing outside our own home, dressed only for indoors, as Catherine slammed the door shut behind us. No matter how hard I knocked, she refused to open it. Lost and stranded, I took Lily to a nearby park for shelter from the pouring rain. Without my wallet or phone, which were inside the house, I felt utterly helpless, unsure of our next move. Exhausted and freezing, I tried to keep us warm as we huddled together. With nightfall approaching and the cold setting in, I feared we might fall ill. Desperate for help, I considered the long walk to my parents' house, despite the distance. As I weighed our options, I noticed two faint lights in the distance. Squinting through the rain, I realized they were police officers approaching. Before I could decide what to do, one of them called out to me. "Are you Emma? And is this little one Lily?" the officer asked, catching me off guard with his knowledge of our names. I nodded weakly, confirming our identities. "Please come with us to the station," the officer requested, and I couldn't help but wonder why they were taking us there. Lily and I obediently got into the patrol car, grateful for the large towels the officers provided to shield us from the cold and rain. As we shivered in the backseat, I couldn't shake off my curiosity. "How did you know where to find us?" I asked, hoping for some answers. "We'll explain everything once we're back at the station," they assured me. Exhausted, I soon drifted off to sleep, only to awaken later to find ourselves at the police station. Following the officers inside, I was taken aback to see Catherine and my uncle waiting for us. "Uncle, what are you doing here?" I asked in surprise. "Bob contacted me. He suspected you might be having trouble with his mom, especially since he's overseas," my uncle explained, shedding some light on the situation. "He wanted me to keep an eye on things for him," my uncle explained. Apparently, Bob had discussed this issue with him before, expressing his concern about not being able to be there himself while he was overseas. My uncle had spotted us in the rain earlier that day and had considered taking us in himself. However, he found Catherine's actions extreme, so he decided to report it to the police. That's why the officers knew where to find us and came to our rescue. Catherine had also been summoned to the police station, where she sat glaring at me, seemingly unaware of the reason for her presence. "Why do I have to be here? My knee is acting up, you know. If Bob were here, none of this would be happening," Catherine argued. Little did she know that this entire situation had unfolded because of Bob reaching out to my uncle for help. During discussions with the police, it became evident that the situation might have legal implications. As a result, I was advised to consider hiring an attorney to navigate the complexities ahead. An attorney? That's an overreaction. I just locked the door, that's all. I didn't do anything else, Catherine protested. "Do you even realize what you've done? You threw Emma and a little child out in torrential rain. That's not something forgivable," my uncle defended us, emphasizing the severity of Catherine's actions and asserting my rightful ownership of the house. "That's impossible. Bob is the head of the household. He's the rightful owner. Now that he's not here, it should be mine," Catherine insisted, misunderstanding the ownership status. In truth, my uncle, who works in real estate, had facilitated a great deal on a condo for us, and Bob had recommended putting it under my name. Following my uncle's guidance, I decided to seek legal advice. The lawyer explained that evicting Catherine would be challenging and suggested considering placement in a care facility. I immediately called Bob to update him on the situation. He hadn't anticipated the severity of the issue and expressed his desire to return from Japan to address it properly, considering placing Catherine in a facility. Unaware of the unfolding developments, Catherine, despite being at the police station, nonchalantly snacked on crackers. Unable to return home with Catherine, I sought refuge at my parents' house until Bob's return. With a week before his arrival, I had time to reflect on our options. If Bob wouldn't support me, then divorce seemed the only option, I lamented, regretting my delay in seeking advice. A week later, Bob returned from Europe, and I moved back home from my parents' place. However, his stay was brief as he needed to go back to Europe soon. With limited time in Japan, we had to discuss our next steps. I heard some things from Emma's uncle. Is all of that true? Bob inquired as soon as we were together. Catherine adamantly denied any wrongdoing, insisting it was all lies and accusing me of plotting against her. Surprisingly, Bob seemed inclined to consider Catherine's perspective. Do you have any evidence to prove Emma's plotting something? Bob asked, seeking clarity. Evidence? Of course not. Emma, do you have any evidence? I admitted I hadn't been able to keep track of things due to my busy work schedule. Uncertain of whom to believe, I handed Bob a voice recorder I had with me. What's this? Bob questioned as I handed it to him. I explained that it contained recordings of Catherine's harsh words and her eviction of me from the house. As Bob listened to the recordings, he heard Catherine's disparaging remarks about me, questioning why he even married me. Catherine quickly began to defend herself upon hearing the playback. This is taken out of context. Everyone has their moments, right? I was just frustrated at that time. But it was just this once. Catherine attempted to downplay her actions, but the voice recorder played a relentless stream of verbal abuse, revealing countless instances of mistreatment, some not even captured on the device. Bob's hand trembled with tension and anger as he held the recorder, while Catherine appeared guilt-ridden. Mom, what is this about? Bob demanded an explanation, but Catherine remained silent. If you won't answer, then I can only assume this is all true. If so, I need to prioritize Emma and Lily's safety. You understand that, right? Bob's anger was palpable, a side of him I had never seen before. Catherine, seemingly realizing the severity of the situation, cowered in fear, unable to respond. In the ensuing discussions before Bob's return to Europe, I made it clear that I could no longer live with Catherine, especially with Lily in the picture. Bob seemed to agree, leaning towards the idea of placing Catherine in a care facility. However, Catherine vehemently opposed the suggestion, complicating matters further. Regardless, I decided to sell the house, so you can't stay here anymore. If you don't want to go to the facility, you'll need to find another place, Bob announced firmly. How dare you decide this on your own? I won't allow you to sell the house. Catherine protested vehemently, but the decision was made. Lily and I had already chosen to move to Europe, as Bob regretted not being more present for his family and was determined to make amends moving forward. Although I had reservations about moving abroad, knowing that Bob would be with us provided some comfort. Plus, I thought it would be beneficial for Lily, who was only 2, to immerse herself in a new environment and practice her communication skills in Europe. Therefore, selling the condo, which still had a mortgage, was the only viable option. Leaving it as it was would burden Catherine with the mortgage payments, which she couldn't afford on her fixed income. Considering her future prospects, it was essential for someone to be available to support her. Despite our best efforts, Catherine refused to move into a care facility voluntarily, so we had no choice but to arrange for her admission forcibly. I'm sorry, but I have to head back to Europe. Could you take care of any necessary procedures here? Bob asked before departing. With assistance from friends and family, I managed to complete the process of admitting Catherine into the facility. The staff there kept me informed about her condition, but it seemed she was struggling. While it would be understandable if she were simply feeling down, she was reportedly making things difficult for the staff and other residents. Before leaving for Europe, I visited Catherine to check on her well-being. However, she lashed out at me, accusing me of imprisoning her in the facility. She also vented her frustrations to the staff, criticizing the food, accommodations, and other residents. Despite apologizing to the staff for her behavior, they reassured me, saying they were accustomed to handling such situations. Despite the challenges and the mistreatment I had endured from Catherine during our time living together, I couldn't help but feel anxious as I embarked on my journey to Europe. Upon arriving in Paris, Bob greeted me at the airport, and we made our way to the apartment we had rented. While they say rents in Paris are steep compared to Texas, Bob's company provides a housing allowance, which allowed us to find a spacious and affordable place. Our neighbors in the building have been incredibly welcoming, despite my limited fluency in French. Just yesterday, one neighbor shared some wine and cheese with me, and in return, I offered them some homemade mac and cheese. In the meantime, I'm gradually picking up French alongside my daughter Lily. Recognizing the limitations of self-study, I've also enrolled in a language school, where I've met other Americans new to France and formed some great friendships. Back in the States, my worries about Catherine often overshadowed my enjoyment of outings with friends. But here in Paris, I can savor leisurely lunches and fully embrace the city's charm. My main concern now is Lily, who is still too young for kindergarten. Typically, children here start kindergarten at 5, so I'm hopeful she'll pick up enough French by then. Thankfully, Lily seems to be adapting quickly. As Lily grows older and approaches preschool age, I'm considering re-entering the workforce. While Bob supports me staying at home, living in Paris has sparked a desire for new opportunities. Witnessing the ambition and confidence of people here has inspired me. I've even befriended a waitress at a nearby cafe who hinted at a potential job opportunity there. The cafe is popular among both Americans and locals learning English, presenting a promising avenue for me. Despite the challenges ahead, our move to France has strengthened the bond between Bob and me. I feel more empowered to express my feelings, and I'm confident that we'll face whatever comes our way as a family. Right now, I've never felt happier in my life.
Tracy, your 60th birthday is coming up. I wanted to celebrate it nicely, so I booked a fancy restaurant. Let's enjoy a meal there. When these words came out of my daughter-in-law Susan's mouth, they were so elegant and refined, quite different from her usual self. My heart danced at the thought of the grand celebration, but inwardly, I felt uneasy about Susan's unusual demeanor. However, I later learned that it was my son, Hilton's idea, and Susan hadn't come up with it herself. I knew it. And yet, Susan had spoken as if it was her own idea, leaving me flabbergasted. Still, since they were going to celebrate my birthday, and it had been a while since I had a meal at a fancy restaurant, I decided to look forward to it. Maybe Susan would be kind while we enjoyed the delicious food. With that in mind, I eagerly awaited the day. On the day of my 60th birthday celebration, I stepped into the luxurious restaurant with a heart full of excitement, but Susan was nowhere to be seen. I waited for a few minutes, but as the clock ticked, my anxiety began to grow. The beautiful flowers and sparkling lights created an atmosphere of celebration for this special day, but the absence of the person who invited me felt strange. Just then, the owner approached me to guide me. And as soon as our eyes met, I was astonished. It was my childhood friend from middle school. Wow, it's been so long! How have you been? I exclaimed with joy, and she smiled back at me. The reunion after decades filled my heart with warm emotions. But in the next moment, she had a complicated expression on her face. Feeling uneasy, I followed her as she led me to the room. As soon as the door closed, she whispered urgently, get out of here right now." Her serious gaze made me flinch. What she revealed about Susan sent chills down my spine. "My name is Tracy, a 59-year-old working mother. My husband passed away early due to illness, and since then, I've been living alone. Fortunately, my in-laws and husband left me an inheritance, so I was able to manage to get by. I have a part-time job, mainly to find a sense of purpose in life. I could live without working, but I don't like staying cooped up at home alone, and more importantly, I want to stay connected with the world. I have an elder son named Hilton. He's 30 years old. He works for an international company and often goes on business trips abroad. My daughter-in-law, Susan, is a housewife, and they have no children. Susan is currently the cause of my distress. Thanks to working at an international company, Hilton earns a substantial income. I think he makes significantly more than his peers. As a result, Susan lives a wealthy lifestyle without having to work. That itself isn't a problem, but Susan has a bit of a spending habit, which has recently gotten worse. She does almost no housework, and their meals are mostly delivery, resulting in unnecessarily high food costs. Moreover, whenever I visit, their house is filled with more and more luxury brand items. Living such a lifestyle must leave Susan with a lot of free time on her hands. However, Susan rarely contacts me. As her mother-in-law, I feel a bit lonely and wish we could be closer. Susan only comes to my house when Hilton gives her some errand. This is a souvenir from Hilton's business trip. I've handed it over, okay? After completing her task, she leaves immediately. Why don't you stay for tea and relax for a while? I've invited her a few times, but each time, she responds irritably. I told you before, I'm busy. I'm not as free as you, Tracy. Honestly, I was worried about Hilton marrying a woman who treated her mother-in-law like this. I didn't want to worry Hilton, so I just smiled and brushed it off. However, Susan was always opinionated and had something to say about every little thing. For example, one day, Susan was unusually coming to visit my house. I wanted to welcome her warmly, so I prepared a lot of home-cooked dishes to entertain her. But my efforts were in vain, and Susan opened her mouth with a subtle expression. Tracy, this food isn't bad, but wouldn't it be better if it were a bit milder? Oh, I see. I'm sorry about that. I'll try to match your taste next time, Susan. I responded with a smile, but my heart was full of suspicion. Because previously, when I served her food, she said, "Isn't this way too bland? It might be good for someone your age, Tracy, but it's not to my taste. Isn't this way too bland? It might be good for someone your age, Tracy, but it's not to my taste." Susan always had a habit of pointing out small things about my cooking. Moreover, every time Susan came to my house, she had some kind of complaint. The TV volume is too high, the vase is slightly off-center. She criticized every little thing. Every time, her complaints were completely different, and I could only see it as nitpicking, but I endured it. One day, while I was out shopping, I happened to run into Susan. At that time, I was picking out new clothes, but Susan said, "Isn't that a bit dull? No one dresses like that these days." Her persistent criticism made me lose confidence. Furthermore, whenever Susan visited my house, it seemed like she was inspecting the kitchen and refrigerator. A refrigerator this full is a waste of electricity. You can't just cram it with food. I kept my thoughts about her lack of thriftiness and constant spending to myself. I do it all for Hilton, who works hard every day. I wanted to avoid causing unnecessary problems with Susan that would burden Hilton. Each time Susan visited, I tried to endure her remarks. Despite everything, I decided to accept her as family. No matter how unpleasant she was, Hilton chose her. There must be wonderful qualities in her that I hadn't seen yet. Thinking this, I tried hard to find good points about Susan. One day, Susan was out with friends and not at home. I was doing my usual chores when a delivery person arrived in the evening. Inside was a box filled with expensive ingredients. "The recipient is Tracy." I was surprised. I had no memory of ordering such a thing. However, upon further inquiry, it turned out that Susan had ordered it. She had me listed as the recipient since she would be out. "Did Susan order this?" When I asked, the delivery person nodded, so I reluctantly accepted it and stored it in the refrigerator until Susan returned. A few hours later, late at night, Susan apparently returned. "I'll take the stuff you were holding for me." Susan came and, without a word of thanks, opened the refrigerator and left quickly. As if that wasn't enough, her behavior afterward was even worse. "Hey! These ingredients are spoiled. How are you storing things?" Even though I had stored them immediately in the fridge, I was perplexed, but I apologized and added a word. "I'm sorry if they got spoiled. It was my mistake." "But Susan, it's not good to do that to others, even if it's okay with me." But she only glared at me and said nothing. After that, Susan occasionally sent old, bulky items to my house as cash on delivery. It was as if she thought of my home as a temporary storage facility. One day, Susan suddenly called me. "Tracy, your 60th birthday is coming up. Congratulations. I want to celebrate it nicely and invite you to a special place. How about it? Let's enjoy a meal at a fancy restaurant. Since you've always helped me, I want to give back on such an occasion. I'll choose the restaurant, so you just look forward to it, Tracy." The words from her mouth were so elegant and refined, completely different from her usual self. While my heart danced at the thought of the grand celebration, inwardly, I felt uneasy about Susan's unusual demeanor. However, later I learned that it was Hilton's idea, and Susan hadn't come up with it herself. I knew it. And yet, Susan had spoken as if it was her own idea, leaving me flabbergasted. Still, since they were going to celebrate my birthday, and it had been a while since I had a meal at a fancy restaurant, I decided to look forward to it. Maybe Susan would be kind while we enjoyed the delicious food. With that in mind, I eagerly awaited the day. The day I had been looking forward to finally arrived. With my heart dancing with excitement, I stepped into the fancy restaurant, but Susan was nowhere to be seen. I waited for a few minutes. As the clock ticked, my anxiety began to grow. Beautiful flowers and sparkling lights created an atmosphere celebrating the special day, but the absence of the person who invited me felt strange. Then, the owner approached me to guide me. And as soon as our eyes met, I was astonished. It was my childhood friend from middle school. "Wow, it's been so long. How have you been? How many years has it been? You haven't changed at all." I exclaimed with joy, and she smiled back at me. I exclaimed with joy, and she smiled back at me. "Oh, you're too kind. But there's no way I haven't changed. It's been decades. Still, what a coincidence that you would come here." The reunion after decades filled my heart with warm emotions. But in the next moment, she had a complicated expression on her face. She seemed to want to tell me something but couldn't bring herself to say it. Feeling uneasy, I followed her as she led me to a room. As soon as the door closed, she whispered urgently, "Get out of here right now." Her serious gaze made me flinch. I didn't know what she meant, but she started talking about Susan. Apparently, Susan had arrived much earlier than I did. The owner had shown Susan to the room first, but noticed something off about her behavior. In the private room, Susan had been talking loudly on her phone and displaying a very unpleasant attitude. She seemed quite rude, and the owner felt repelled by her. From the conversation, it became clear that Susan was talking to a loan shark. Anyway, my mother-in-law will pay for everything today. She's coming soon, so just wait a bit. What? Don't worry, she always bows to me. She's an old, doddering woman. Just press her a bit, and she'll pay up quietly. And make sure to keep your mouth shut. If my husband finds out, it'll be a big problem. I'm counting on you. This is what she had said. Feeling uneasy about Susan's behavior, the owner realized from the detailed instructions about the restaurant's location and time that something was definitely going to happen. I didn't know what to do, but then you showed up. I had to tell you right away. The owner had the presence of mind to guide me to a different seat without Susan noticing and tell me everything. She also told me about the shocking phone conversation. Susan, who apparently loves luxury goods, couldn't sustain her spending with Hilton's salary alone and had debts all over the place. She seems to owe a lot. I could hear yelling from the other side of the call. It didn't sound legitimate, probably loan sharks. According to what she heard, the amount had reached $50,000. Hearing that, I felt my eyes almost pop out. How could someone rack up so much debt, one after another? And to think she planned to make me pay for it all, it was beyond comprehension. But then, a thought occurred to me. If I run away now, wouldn't it just repeat the same cycle? Susan would find some reason to come to me for money again. She might even show up with loan sharks. In other words, running away wouldn't solve the fundamental problem. With this realization, I finally made a decision. I had been lenient with Susan, considering Hilton. But I couldn't tolerate it any longer. More importantly, it wasn't fair to Hilton to stay with such a person. Despite earning a good salary at an international company, he was being exploited. Thinking about Hilton, I felt a deep sense of injustice. So, I told the owner, I have an idea. Please take me to the same room as her. The owner was very surprised. If you do that, the loan sharks will really come. She was genuinely worried about me. But I responded firmly to her concern. I understand that. But running away won't change anything. I've endured it so far, but now it's time to eliminate the root cause. The owner's shoulders relaxed and smiled. That's right. You've always been determined once you made up your mind. Understood. If you're that resolved, you must have a solid plan. She said this and guided me to the room where Susan was waiting. What were you doing? You were late. I was worried you wouldn't come. When I arrived, Susan seemed visibly shaken. She must have feared what the loan sharks might do if I didn't show up. Seeing me appear, her expression showed a bit of relief. But I knew all about her scheme. I won't let her have her way. Before coming to this room, I had made a phone call. While chatting with Susan, I was anxiously waiting for my call's recipient to arrive. As time passed, Susan grew increasingly irritated. She probably wanted the loan shark to arrive quickly. Then, the owner spoke from the other side of the door. Excuse me. Your companion has arrived. Susan, with a loud voice, said, Please let them in immediately. Certainly. However, the person who walked in wasn't a loan shark. Instead, a woman in a police uniform stood there. What? A police officer? What is going on? Long time no see, Susan. I hear you've been giving Mom a hard time. The person who appeared was my daughter, Yolanda. She is an active duty police officer. I had been consulting her about Susan's harassment for some time. Then, the owner spoke up. I overheard everything you said on the phone. You were trying to make this lady pay off your debts, weren't you? With this, Susan finally seemed to grasp the situation. I see, that's what this is about. So you called the police. I didn't say anything like that. This is just a big misunderstanding. But Yolanda pressed on. This lady says she heard everything clearly. Unlike me, Yolanda is strong-willed. She is not afraid to speak her mind to anyone. Her personality alone is intimidating enough, but today she was wearing her police uniform, which would surely make Susan feel even more uneasy. What proof do you have? Maybe she just misheard. Susan tried to play dumb. She even cast a disdainful glance at me. At that moment, I decided to reveal everything. I've told Yolanda everything about you. She held back because of Hilton, but she always told me to report any danger immediately. Apparently, today is that day. Realizing that everything was known, Susan suddenly changed her attitude and began to shout. Don't mess with me. People like you should just keep paying up. Both you and that idiot Hilton. With that, Susan threw a glass from the table at me. But the glass missed me and hit the pillar with a loud crash. Then Yolanda said, Hilton, you heard everything, right? She pulled out her phone from her pocket. On the screen was Hilton's name, shining brightly in an ongoing call. Susan! I heard everything! You were bullying Mom behind my back? And what's this about debts? I've given you more than enough money for living expenses. Hilton's loud, angry voice echoed from the phone. Even Susan was flustered and began making desperate excuses. No, it's not like that. We were just joking around, right, Tracy? She probably thought she could fool us because it was over the phone. But Yolanda warned Hilton. Don't be deceived. She just threw a glass at Mom. Don't be deceived. She just threw a glass at Mom. Hilton was furious. What? The sound of something breaking earlier, was that? We're getting a divorce. I'm on my way there, so be prepared. Hilton ended the call and seemed to be rushing over. It turned out that Susan had given me a time 2 hours earlier than planned. In other words, she wanted to have me meet the loan shark early. Hilton, deceived by Susan, didn't know we had arrived early and was still working. When Susan realized that the furious Hilton was coming, she turned pale. What should I do? If this continues, I'll be divorced. Please, you have to say something. Even now, Susan didn't apologize and clung to us. What nonsense are you talking about? In this situation, no one will help you. Stop being so spoiled. Since I had never spoken harshly to Susan before, she seemed quite shocked. But if Hilton comes, it will be over. What should I do? You don't have to wait for Hilton. You are coming with us to the station. Despite her panic, Yolanda added, for all the harassment towards Mom and especially throwing the glass at her, you'll be charged with assault. And I witnessed everything, so there's no escaping this. As for your debts, you will have to pay them back yourself. With those words, Susan finally resigned herself and was taken away by Yolanda in a daze. It was later revealed that Susan had indeed been involved with loan sharks. Susan had a strong desire to show off to those around her. To do so, she decked herself out in luxury goods and boasted to the other mom friends. Hilton's income wasn't enough, so she secretly turned to various loan sharks. But Hilton's reaction when he heard about it was surprising. To be honest, I had a feeling. I was at fault for leaving the household finances to Susan, but when I checked the account recently, it was at zero. Hilton had also been consulting Yolanda about Susan. Yolanda had been waiting for an opportunity to expose the loan sharks by using Susan. As a follow-up, thanks to Yolanda's efforts, the loan sharks were successfully apprehended. This incident prompted Hilton to serve Susan with divorce papers and tell her, "Get out of the house right now." Of course, Susan didn't want to give up her luxurious lifestyle. She refused frantically, not wanting a divorce because of her huge debts. "Can you still say that after seeing this?" Hilton showed her a compiled record of her debts and evidence of her harassment towards me. "If you don't want a divorce, pay off all your debts by yourself right now. And deeply apologize to Mom for all the harassment. Don't come back until she forgives you completely." At that moment, Susan came to me, crying and apologizing. "I'm truly sorry. I was out of my mind. I promised to change. Please forgive me." But I knew her apology was only superficial. She needed my forgiveness to get Hilton to revoke the divorce. In essence, she was only apologizing deeply for Hilton's money. Raise your head. No matter what you do, the past won't disappear. I can't support you up close, but from now on, please change as you say and do your best. I told her not to involve me anymore and sent her away. Eventually, Susan, unable to find any way out, vanished to escape the loan sharks, and now nobody knows where she is or what she is doing. My 60th birthday celebration was held again at a later date. There, I shared old stories with Hilton and Yolanda, reminiscing with the owner. After all, it had been decades since then. The story got quite lengthy, and I could tell both of them were getting tired of it. "Mom, that's enough. We already heard that story." Hilton and Yolanda, though smiling wryly, continued to listen, making me happy, so I kept talking. Being able to laugh like this is a blessing. Reaffirming this, I quietly smiled with relief. From now on, I want to enjoy a peaceful life with just my family. The doorbell rang, so I went to the video intercom to answer it and saw my brother's wife, Natalie, waving at me. As I opened the front door, Natalie handed me a gift and greeted me with a deep bow. "Thank you so much, Mary. Has Allison been a good girl?" Natalie walked into the living room. "As always, what a lovely home," she said as she looked around the room and placed her bag on the sofa. "Huh? Where's Allison? Is she out playing with friends? It's Sunday. I don't think she has any club activities today." "Wait a second. Natalie, what are you talking about? She hasn't come to our place?" Natalie tilted her head slightly and let out a surprised, "Huh?" After a brief pause, Natalie gave a strange smile and said that Allison was supposed to stay with me while they were away on a business trip overseas. I do remember being asked to look after her, but I'm often away from home for work, so I'm sure I declined. When I told her this, Natalie showed me the screen of her smartphone. It displayed a message. "Having a great time at Mary's place," Allison had sent to her mother. I stared at the phone screen in a panic. It had been a week since she sent that message. This means that while her parents were away, she had lied about staying at my place and had been living somewhere else. If a 14-year-old girl lies to gain a week of freedom, it's hard to imagine anything good. "What should we do, Mary? Where could she be?" At this point, neither Natalie nor I had any idea how unexpectedly this would unfold. My name is Mary. I'm turning 40 this year, yet there's not a single topic of romance in my life. Since I live in a high-rise apartment in the city center, I take pride in being relatively successful in my career. After my bath, I touched my skin in front of the mirror and noticed it was a bit rough. I did stay up late last night. My skin often gets rough, probably because I tend to have a reverse day-night lifestyle. Even so, I quite like my current fulfilling life. Suddenly, my smartphone vibrated to notify me of an incoming call. It was from my brother Ryan and Natalie, a classmate of mine since middle school. Natalie has always called me Mary, and being around with me since she was little. Since she married Ryan, she's become like a real sister to me, which just goes to show how interesting life can be. Hello. What's up? Mary, listen. Ryan, he is just... Natalie immediately started bad-mouthing Ryan to me. I wonder if they're fighting again. But her tone is a bit cheerful, and by the end of the conversation, she's usually calm as always. So, he bought some apples and grapes at the supermarket, but he says we don't need to put them in the fridge. Well, they do sell them at room temperature in stores. But they definitely taste better chilled, don't they? He complains that the fridge will get too cramped. I couldn't help but chuckle. To think they're fighting over such a trivial thing. After venting about the fridge issue, Natalie's voice dropped a little as she began to talk. You know, lately Allison has been asking to play with us a lot. Until recently, she was mostly playing with her friends. Oh, as a parent, it must be nice to have your child want to spend time with you for as long as possible, right? Ryan seems happy too. There was a time when she hated walking with us. Despite their bickering, my brother and his wife seemed to get along well. When Natalie started laughing, I asked her why, and she excitedly raised her voice. Maybe it's because we've been spending more time with Allison. Ryan has started to dress up a bit lately. Sometimes he even wears cologne. I guess a daughter's influence can be huge. I had always thought of him as a bit of a slob, far from fashionable, but I realized that it takes various efforts to be loved by your adorable only daughter. Seemingly satisfied after talking to me, Natalie thanked me and hung up the phone. A while later, I received a text from Ryan. Mary, should we store the apples and grapes in the fridge? After reading the message, I replied that I didn't know since I rarely buy fruit these days. I took an energy drink out of the fridge, took a sip, and crawled into bed. I'm glad that I can get along well with both my brother and his wife. But I feel like their daughter, Allison, has been keeping her distance from me lately. She is about to take her high school entrance exams, and she's probably in the midst of a sensitive and turbulent adolescence. When she was little, she was my one and only niece, and I couldn't help but adore her. When she looked at me with those big eyes, I felt like she had my heart in a vice grip. I sent Allison so many clothes and toys that Ryan and his wife were bewildered. She used to be very attached to me, but for the past 6 months or so, she seemed a bit down. Natalie must know about my poor eating habits as a single woman, because she sometimes invites me over for dinner. Honestly, I don't pay attention to the nutritional balance of my meals. As long as it's easy to eat and fills me up, that's good enough for me. Natalie always scolds me lightly for thinking that way, and makes me a salad. Feeling a bit tired, I stuff the salad into my mouth and lament. Eating this many vegetables. I feel like a horse or a goat. Natalie and her husband laugh. Only Allison, who was sitting at the same table, kept her eyes downcast as she took small bites of her salad, looking bored. As I recalled various things, I fell asleep. I hope to always get along well with my kind brother's family. One day, as I was pondering over a map of the Boston area spread out on the table, I got a call from Natalie. I hesitated for a bit, thinking I wouldn't answer, but she kept calling back. Thinking it might be an emergency, I picked up the phone. Hello, what's going on? Mary, I'm really sorry, but I have a favor to ask. I instinctively braced myself at Natalie's somewhat coy tone. As I listened, Natalie told me she was going on a business trip overseas next week. She wanted to ask me to take care of Allison while she was away. She has been working hard since getting married, not wanting to give up her career, and it seems she doesn't want to turn down this overseas trip using Allison as an excuse. If Ryan's around, shouldn't it be okay? Ryan's been transferred to the Los Angeles branch since last month. So if I go on this trip, Allison will be all alone. I could hear the genuine distress in her voice over the phone. I stared at the map, lost in thought for a moment. My room is full of important work documents, And even though she's a relative's child, I don't want her coming and going as she pleases. Besides, I'm going to be busy running around myself. Sorry. I really can't do it. I'm going to be away from home a lot more often too. She is a responsible girl who can manage on her own. But I'd feel more at ease if there was at least an adult with her at night. I had intended to politely refuse, but she was surprisingly persistent in asking me. I opened my schedule book to check, but there was no way I could take in Allison no matter how I looked at it. I told her again that it was impossible for me. I see. My trip is next week, so can I contact you again? Please let me know if you think you can adjust your schedule. Natalie must not want her daughter Allison to feel lonely. I do want to help out somehow, but if I make a careless promise, I'll only have a hard time later. Just as I had made up my mind not to take in Allison, a message arrived on my smartphone. It was from Allison, and the text was very polite and concise. Mom's worried about me, but I'll be fine on my own. I'll let Mom know myself, it said. Even as the day of her overseas trip approached, I didn't hear from her again. I guess that means they found a satisfactory solution. I felt relieved at the thought. A week later, I was cleaning my house. As I put away the maps and documents spread out on the table, I returned several books to the bookshelf. I organized data on my computer and wiped off stubborn stains on the gas stove. This week's work had been exhausting. But somehow, I couldn't settle down without moving my body, so I started thoroughly cleaning my room, which I rarely do. Lately, there have been situations where I feel I lack efficiency. When I try to juggle multiple tasks at once, my mind gets confused. Cleaning is important in the sense of getting my feelings in order too. Before going over the materials my coworker had prepared for me, I was determined to make everything in sight spotless. Ding dong. The doorbell rang, so I checked the monitor and saw Natalie waving. When I opened the front door, Natalie handed me a gift and greeted me with a deep bow. Thank you so much, Mary. Has Allison been a good girl? Natalie entered the living room. As always, what a lovely home, she said as she looked around and placed the bag she brought on the sofa. Huh? Where's she? Is she out playing with friends? It's Sunday. She shouldn't have any club activities. Wait a minute. Natalie. What are you talking about? She hasn't come to our place? Natalie tilted her head slightly and let out a surprised. Huh? After a brief pause, Natalie gave a strange smile and said that I was supposed to look after her daughter while she was away on a business trip overseas. I do remember being asked to take care of Allison, but I'm often away from home for work, so I'm sure I declined. When I told her this, Natalie showed me the screen of her smartphone. It displayed a message. Having a great time at Mary's place, Allison had sent to her mother. I stared at the phone screen in a panic. It had been a week since Allison sent that message. This means that while her parents were away, Allison had lied about staying at my place and had been living somewhere else. If a 14-year-old girl lies to gain a week of freedom, it's hard to imagine anything good. Allison's mother, Natalie, must feel the same way. She's frantically trying to call Allison, but it seems she can't get through. What should we do, Mary? Where could she be? Calm down, Natalie. Let's go back to your house first. Maybe she's just been at home as usual. She might have thought it would be more comfortable to be home alone than to live with me, her aunt. Saying it myself made me feel a bit lonely, but it seemed like the most likely answer. When I suggested going back to their house first, Natalie asked me to come along with her. I have a bad feeling about this. She's never been the type to lie like that before. I checked the time on my watch. I had an appointment to meet someone for work in the evening, but she looked at me with pleading eyes. I was also curious as to why Allison would tell such a lie, and worried that she might have gotten involved in something bad, so I decided to go with her. I gathered my work documents and headed to my brother and his wife's house in my car. I had heard they moved a few years ago, but this was my first time actually visiting their home. In the car, Natalie kept calling and messaging Allison, but there was no response.
Why won't she reply?
Following Natalie's directions, I drove for about 20 minutes and entered a residential area just outside of Boston. Despite a strange sense of unease, I slowly drove through the narrow, familiar streets. My brother and his wife's house had a 2-car parking space, and I parked next to Ryan's white work car. As soon as I turned off the engine, Natalie quickly got out of the car and started taking the key out of her bag in front of the entrance. I looked up at my brother and his wife's house and felt a strange sense of déjà vu. It seemed like I had seen it somewhere before. Wait, this house.
Mary! What are you doing? Come on!
Urged by Natalie, I grabbed my bag from the car and immediately headed to the front door. Finding the key in my bag, I entered the house and was greeted by Ryan, who bowed slightly in the entryway.
Oh. Mary. What brings you here? So suddenly.
Ryan, why are you home?
Weren't you on a solo job transfer?
Well, yeah, but
I wanted to see Allison once in a while.
Ryan's unnatural behavior, trying not to make eye contact. But more than that, I was concerned about Allison hiding behind Ryan, her face downcast. Natalie led Allison to the living room, where they sat facing each other across a table. I put my bag down a short distance away and checked my phone. There were several missed calls from my coworker.
Allison, why did you lie about staying at Mary's place?
Natalie questioned her with a stern expression I had never seen before. Allison remained silent, her mouth tightly shut. She kept her head down, staring at her knees. Natalie waited for a while for her to speak, but gradually gave up, ran her fingers through her hair, and let out a small sigh.
Lately, you've been asking us to go out together. We've been going to the park and movies a lot. I thought we were connecting.
Upon hearing those words, Allison looked up in surprise and immediately glanced at me. Then, she averted her eyes again, and I tilted my head at her behavior. What was that just now? It seemed like she was trying to tell her mother something, but stopped because I was here.
When did Ryan come back in the first place? If you were coming home, you'd normally let us know.
Oh, well, yeah, but, you know.
What? Are you hiding something? Isn't this weird?
Natalie pressed Ryan, who was clearly acting strange, with an irritated tone. I was concerned about Allison's sad expression. What was she hiding? Casually looking around the room, I noticed a reflection of light at the base of a potted plant in the corner. A hidden camera? When I looked at Allison, she seemed to have noticed that I had spotted the camera and stared back at me with a surprised face. Ryan, persistently questioned by Natalie, eventually showed his anger, and the two began to argue. Allison stood up, giving me a look, and quietly went upstairs. I followed suit, and when I entered Allison's room, I sat on the bed as she suggested.
You set up a camera at the base of the potted plant?
As expected, Mary, you've always been very perceptive. Allison sank deeply into the chair at her desk, looking dejected. The intense argument between Ryan and Natalie could be heard from downstairs. I tried to act as natural as possible and waited silently for Allison to start talking. I'm good at waiting like this. Eventually, Allison began to speak as if she had given up.
It was really just by chance, but I saw Dad walking in the city with a woman I didn't know. They looked like they were having a great time.
You mean, he's having an affair? Allison nodded slightly.
At the time, I didn't think it was particularly strange. I thought maybe they were just work associates. But then I saw them together a few more times.
Allison hung her head sadly. Imagining how Allison must have felt seeing her dad happily walking with a young woman she didn't know made my heart ache.
Mom sometimes has work on weekends. On those days, I often play at my friends' houses, and Dad goes out alone.
Wait, hold on, don't tell me.
I started to think that he might be bringing his mistress home when no one's around.
Realizing the weight of her own words, Allison's face looked like she was about to cry.
I wanted to stop it.
She continued in a choked voice.
I wanted to stop his affair, before Mom found out, before their relationship turned sour. I wanted to stop it no matter what.
The hidden camera she had placed in the potted plant was apparently to capture evidence of Ryan bringing his mistress home while no one was around.
But in the end, I couldn't get any proof of Dad bringing someone home, but I'm sure Dad is having an affair.
At that moment, my smartphone vibrated. After excusing myself to Allison, I checked and saw a message from my colleague. I glanced at the content, looked at the attached image, and quickly put it back in my pocket.
Is everything okay with work?
Allison asked worriedly, but I just smiled. I felt relieved that the hidden camera didn't capture Ryan bringing another woman home. If Allison, his daughter, saw such footage, how hurt would she be? But she herself seemed to have a slightly different mindset, clenching her fists on her knees.
I searched all over the house for evidence of the affair. But there's no decisive proof, but I'm sure he's cheating. Maybe it's a woman's intuition.
Allison laughed self-deprecatingly. Allison, who is in charge of the laundry, said she had noticed that the frequency of Ryan's underwear and socks being replaced had increased about 6 months ago. They had gone from plain to bright colors, and the clincher was the scent of cologne.
Dad was wearing cologne. It didn't suit him at all, the kind of cologne a young boy would wear.
Allison made a disgusted face. For her, Ryan's infidelity was a certainty, and she must have planned to find evidence during Natalie's overseas business trip. She said she had desperately searched the empty house and discovered Ryan's old computer. While examining the computer, she found photos and videos of Ryan having a good time with an unknown woman.
At least, when I think that he was cheating even before replacing this computer, more than feeling sad or frustrated.
Allison paused and closed her eyes.
I thought, I have to protect Mom.
And today, Allison had called Ryan home and urged him to stop the affair. The photos and videos on the computer weren't decisive evidence, so he pretended not to know, apparently.
I want to stop Dad's affair without Mom finding out, but is that impossible?
At that point, Allison shed large tears. I see, so that's why Natalie had said that Allison was spending more time with the family. She must have thought that if they spent more time as a family, he would have fewer opportunities to meet his mistress and would prioritize the family. If Natalie found out about the affair, she might get a divorce. Allison wanted to stop her father's affair before that and create a happy family once again. Knowing the heavy burden this 14-year-old girl was carrying, I quietly clutched my smartphone in my pocket. I gently hugged Allison's shoulders. She was crying, trembling slightly.
It's not good that you lied about staying at my place, to try to find evidence of the affair. Natalie was really worried about you.
Yes.
I'm sorry. And if he is cheating, you need to let Natalie know and make him stop. If things stay like this, he'll be betraying her forever.
I gave the anxious-looking Allison an awkward wink and left the room. As I went downstairs, the two were still arguing. I silently held out my smartphone screen in front of Ryan. Ryan, who had been arguing heatedly, was at a loss for words and stopped moving.
I'm sorry, but from here on, I'll be talking to Ryan not as a sister, but for work.
Wait a minute, what is that photo?
I think you know this, Ryan, but I work as a private investigator. Recently, I was asked by a man to investigate his wife's infidelity, and
I also showed him the file from my bag. My colleague had compiled the data, but the information sent to my phone earlier had made it click. When I first came to this house, I had a bad feeling. My colleague's report said that the wife under investigation may be in a relationship with a specific man. I thought the home of that specific man looked strangely similar to Ryan's house. Looking back at the photos, it was definitely his house. With multiple cases going on simultaneously, I hadn't realized it,
But it's quite a pitiful story that the person my detective colleague was investigating turned out to be Ryan. Don't try to talk your way out of this. I'm a professional too. I have quite a bit of evidence. As I lightly tapped the stack of documents, Ryan glanced at Natalie with a frightened look. After that, he was scolded by an enraged Natalie to an extent that can't even be described. In the end, he deeply reflected on this incident and cut ties with his mistress. A settlement was reached with the man who had requested the infidelity investigation. Since both parties were married and having an affair, I warned them that it would get messy if they made a fuss, so we were able to avoid the worst-case scenario of a lawsuit. Allison's desperate efforts and wish to resolve the issue without Natalie finding out didn't come true. On that point, I strongly persuaded Natalie as well. Hey, think about why Allison was trying so desperately to stop Ryan's affair. I understand how you feel, Natalie, but try to consider her feelings too. That's about all I could say. The rest is a marital issue. How it turns out, even a child, let alone a relative like me, couldn't possibly know. Allison's strong desire of, I don't want them to get divorced, seems to have reached Natalie, and she forgave Ryan. In exchange, since this incident, he hasn't been able to treat Natalie as an equal. Apparently, even when they argue over small things, Ryan immediately apologizes. Apples and grapes should be stored in the fridge. When I visited Ryan's house for the first time in a while, Natalie was scolding Ryan in a stern tone. It seems he hadn't put the fruit he bought in the refrigerator. I glanced at the potted plant in the corner of the room with a wry smile. There was no hidden camera anymore, and Allison, sitting on the sofa, was happily watching her parents. He's been nicely whipped into shape. I laughed. Geez, it doesn't really make a difference whether you chill them or not. That's not true. Fruits that contain fructose increase in sweetness when chilled. It's not just your imagination, they become several times more delicious. I had looked it up when I heard the story about them arguing over whether to put things in the fridge or not. I've always had a personality where I can't leave things alone if I'm curious about them. If I think something's strange, I thoroughly investigate it, which is why I've made a career out of being a detective. Detective Mary, let me know if there are any suspicious movements so Dad never cheats again, Allison said mischievously while hugging me. As Ryan scratched his head with a wry smile, Natalie smacked Ryan's head with a straight face. I meant it as a joke when I said I'd be watching him from time to time to make sure he doesn't do anything weird, but he gulped. I'm sure this family will be all right now. I'll make you happy for my late wife and son. What? I almost blurted out. I wondered whose wife and son he was declaring dead. Eavesdropping further, Thomas uttered something even more unbelievable. You're all I have left after losing everything. Will you marry me? I could never forgive Thomas for pretending that his wife and son were dead. To think he would go as far as lying and proposing to such a young woman. Of course, I couldn't just stay silent. When I looked at Brian, he met my gaze and nodded. Then, we stood up and approached Thomas. Hello, your dead former family here. We've come back from the afterlife just for you, Dad. Thomas's eyes widened in shock at our sudden appearance. It was from there that Brian and I began our revenge on Thomas. My name is Chloe. I'm a 48-year-old housewife and have been married for 24 years. I grew up as an only child in a family where both my parents were high school teachers. Although my grandmother took care of me when I was little, I spent a lot of time alone after she passed away when I was in middle school. My parents were often away from home even during summer breaks and other long vacations, as my dad coached baseball and my mom coached volleyball. Seeing my friends' moms at home being housewives or working part-time and being home in the evenings made me envious. So, I decided I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom when I got married and had kids instead of being out at work. Being a quiet person, I never had a boyfriend until I graduated from college. My mom got worried for me, so she introduced me to a young male teacher who was a colleague of hers shortly after I graduated from college. His name was Thomas Jones. He had a nice figure, and he was handsome. According to my mom, he was sociable and well-liked by the students. He seemed too good for someone quiet and plain like me. But Thomas, respecting my mom as a more experienced teacher, took our relationship seriously. A year after we met, Thomas and I got married. Having felt lonely as a child, I told Thomas that I wanted to focus on our family instead of work. He agreed, saying he had felt the same as his parents both worked. He wanted me to stay at home. Thomas and I shared the same values. I thought we could build a happy home together. However, Thomas, being sociable, valued his relationships with colleagues and students. That's a good thing, but he often neglected life at home. We rarely spoke to each other, and when we did, it was only when he had something he needed me to do.
I'm glad that you became a housewife to take care of this household, Chloe. I can rely on you for anything.
Thomas always flattered me like this, leaving everything to me, even things he could do himself. But hearing this made me feel needed, and I tried to take it positively. I suppose it would have been better to get mad at him and say,
I'm not just a housekeeper, you know.
On top of that, since the beginning of our marriage, he would never be home at night during the weekends. He would usually be out drinking with his colleagues or his former students. Indeed, I had heard from my parents that many teachers would drink to relieve their stress. But my parents were different. My mom didn't drink, and my dad rarely went out for a drink out of consideration for my mom. I realized some teachers really enjoyed their drinks seeing Thomas's lifestyle. But I kept quiet at first because it didn't affect our living costs. However, Thomas still kept it up even after our child was born, so I got increasingly unhappy about it. Hey, Thomas. I get that socializing is important, but can't you say no every now and then? I had kept quiet until then, but I couldn't take it anymore. Thomas looked puzzled and responded, What? Why are you asking this now? You never mentioned it before. Well, my parents told me that teachers have a lot of socializing to do. But I want you to value your time at home too, for Brian's sake. I said this for the sake of my son Brian, but Thomas furrowed his brow as if he was offended.
Look, both of your parents are teachers, right? So, if they come across any problems at work, they can talk to each other about it. But I don't have that, so going out with other teachers for drinks is my only option.
Thomas made his point as a teacher. Hearing that made me feel helpless since I didn't work, and it left me feeling lonely. Regardless of how I felt, it must have been lonely for our son, Brian, to have his dad gone every weekend. All I want is for Thomas to genuinely connect with Brian. But Thomas didn't even try to understand my feelings. Despite having these thoughts, I couldn't say anything back to him. Even though I found this frustrating, there was nothing I could do about it, and a rift gradually developed between us. However, our life wasn't entirely lonely. Thomas was well liked by his students, and those who had already graduated and are now working often came to visit him. In particular, 2 of his students, who were the class clowns, have been visiting us frequently in the past 5 to 6 years. Their names are Miller and Martin. They would still come over on their days off even after graduating from college and getting a job. Thanks to them, Thomas has been going out less over the past few years. Brian, now in his senior year in college, has become quite close to them, perhaps because they are around the same age. I feel kind of happy too when they come to visit us with their bright and friendly personalities. They always looked out for me and would bring over cakes and such. Today, they brought a cake over on their day off. But Thomas had been out since the morning. I'm sorry, guys. My husband has been out since last night and hasn't returned yet. They looked a bit awkward when I greeted them at the door. Perhaps they felt bad for visiting when Thomas was away. No, we're sorry for bothering you when Mr. Jones isn't here. But, is Brian here? Brian? Yes, he's here. Hearing their voices, Brian came out of his room. In fact, he was getting ready to go out as if he had been waiting for the 2 of them to come. Mom, I'm going out with the guys for a bit. Brian left with a somewhat burdened expression, along with the other two. It seemed like they had something they didn't want me to hear. Well, boys their age might have concerns they can't share with their mothers. I watched them leave with a sense of unease but didn't say anything. Later, I passed by Brian's room, and I noticed his phone ringing. It's rare for Brian to forget his phone. I went into his room to pick it up. And without intending to, I touched the screen which wasn't locked and caught my breath. It was a message thread from Miller. He sent a picture showing Thomas with his arm around a young woman entering a hotel. The message read, "I don't want to believe it, but the woman with Mr. Jones seems to be from a club. I secretly followed them after they left." Brian replied, "I'll keep quiet because Mom would be shocked if she finds out." That's probably why they came to see Brian. Or maybe they hoped to figure out if Thomas had returned. Anyway, my mind went into a panic. The thought of Thomas cheating. I had an urge to confront him directly, but I hesitated. Brian was in the middle of job hunting, so I didn't want to trouble him with our marital problems. So, I decided to pretend I hadn't seen the message for now. When Brian returned, he still looked troubled. I greeted him, trying to appear calm. Then Thomas came home. He looked puzzled at Brian and I.
"What's up? You both look so out of it."
An awkward silence filled the air. Brian must have been careful that I don't find out. For a while, Brian and I continued to act as if nothing was amiss when Thomas was around. Months passed, and soon it was almost Christmas. We planned to spend Christmas Eve as a family, celebrating Brian getting a job. However, I was still troubled by Thomas's suspected infidelity and couldn't bring myself to speak up. Then, Thomas said something.
"I'll come home late for a year-end party on the 24th of this month, so I won't need dinner."
It makes sense that there would be a party on that day. But given the date, I couldn't help but wonder if he was lying. Even so, I couldn't confront him about it, so for the time being, I just replied, "Yes." Lately, I haven't had a proper conversation with Thomas, and I feel suffocated every day. Seeing me constantly like this, Brian made a thoughtful gesture for me.
"Mom. Actually, I got 2 dinner vouchers for a hotel where Miller's relative works. It's for the 24th, but let's go together." "Really? You want to take me out for dinner? Don't you have someone else you want to go with?"
I asked Brian shyly in reply to his invitation, but Brian answered as if he was trying hard to come up with an excuse. No, Miller and Martin seem to have plans that day. And my friends from school said they'd be spending it with their girlfriends." I decided to accept the invitation because Brian was concerned about my loneliness. It's been years since I've gone out for a meal with Brian. And it's at a very fancy hotel, so I thought I might dress up a bit. I was looking forward to the day with such excitement, but I never imagined I would encounter such misfortune on that day. And then, on the night of the 24th, Brian and I went to the hotel for dinner. It was more luxurious than I had imagined, and I almost faltered for a moment. I nervously entered the restaurant on the top floor of the hotel and was led to our table by a waiter. It felt more like a place where couples come to propose than a mother and son dining together. Looking around, there were indeed many young couples. In particular, the couple sitting by the window with the woman in very flashy makeup and clothes, and I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the man sitting opposite the woman. He was sitting with his back to us, so I didn't realize it at first, but the man was Thomas. Thomas was dressed in a formal suit like I had never seen before. It was probably either newly bought for this occasion or rented. I was frozen and couldn't move from the spot. I think Brian hadn't realized Thomas was there yet, so I tried to act calm. However, since our seats were close, I could clearly hear Thomas's voice.
"I'll make you happy for my late wife and son." "What?"
I almost blurted out. I wondered whose wife and son he was declaring dead. Eavesdropping further, Thomas uttered something even more unbelievable. "You're all I have left after losing everything. Will you marry me?"
"Me? Really? I'm so happy."
The seat was by a large window offering a panoramic night view of the city. She must have been deeply moved by being proposed to in such a romantic atmosphere. Brian, sitting opposite of me, seemed to realize it was his dad's voice and turned around quickly.
"Brian, wait."
I hurriedly stopped Brian from seeing Thomas's face behind us. But it seemed Brian already realized the man proposing to the unknown woman was his dad. Brian and I silently eavesdropped. Thomas's proposal went on.
"You're the best. After losing my wife and son, I had lost the will to live, but thanks to you, the future seems bright." "Really? You rely on me that much?" "Of course. I'm even thankful to my deceased family because I got to meet you."
Thomas took something out of his pocket with sweet words. It appeared to be an engagement ring. It looked much more expensive than the one he gave me. I could never forgive Thomas for pretending that his wife and son were dead. To think he would go as far as lying and proposing to such a young woman. Of course, I couldn't just stay silent. When I looked at Brian, he met my gaze and nodded. Then, we stood up and approached Thomas.
"Hello, your dead former family here. We've come back from the afterlife just for you, Dad."
Thomas's eyes widened in shock at our sudden appearance. The mistress, not understanding what was going on, looked surprised.
"Who's this woman? And the mama's boy? Do you know them, Thomas?"
Who knows?
"They're total strangers. Just some troublemakers, I guess. Just ignore them."
Thomas tried to brush it off, but sweat was trickling down his forehead. The woman glared at us, thinking that Brian and I were just here to cause trouble.
"Hey, what's your problem, lady? You can't harass us like this just because you're jealous of our happiness." "It's not harassment. You're being deceived. This man is Thomas. He's my husband." "Oh, sure, the name matches, but does that prove he's your husband? If you're going to make baseless accusations, I'll call the police."
"We have proof right here," Brian said and took an envelope out of his bag. Inside was our marriage certificate. Arya, the mistress, grabbed it and showed it to Thomas.
"What's this about, Thomas? You said you had lost your wife and child."
Confronted by Arya, Thomas shrunk back, unable to say anything. That was when I wondered. Why had Brian brought something like that? Noticing my puzzled look, Brian seemed to catch on to my question. Then, looking at Thomas, he said,
"Dad, I've known for a while now that you've been cheating on Mom with this woman. And I found out you'd be meeting her here today." "What are you talking about?"
Thomas still tried to play dumb at this point. What an awfully stubborn man.
"Ha!"
Brian scoffed at those words.
"There's no escaping it now, Dad. I've got the whole proposal recorded on my phone." "What are you talking about? You don't have one on you right now. If you're wondering where it is, the attorney sitting over there has it."
Brian pointed to a seat where Martin and a man around 50 were seated. Miller emerged from the back of the restaurant. It seemed like they had planned this together in advance to confront Thomas about his affair. I was surprised Brian had orchestrated this. Then, the man with Martin approached us.
"Hello, I'm Martin's father. I hear that you have always been very kind to my son." "Oh, Martin's father. It's been a long time."
"Well, I believe this is actually the first time seeing you in person, sir. I'm ashamed to say I've left everything concerning my son's school to my wife."
"Are you here for dinner with your family today?"
Thomas seemed puzzled to find Martin and his father at such a place. Then Martin, sitting next to his dad, spoke up.
"I asked him to be here with me, sir. My father's a lawyer. When I told him I had something I wanted him to look into, he had a friend investigate and found out you'd be here today with your mistress."
Thomas looked surprised when he heard that Martin's father was a lawyer and that he was being investigated. Naturally, his guilty conscience must have made him react that way. I had no idea they had gone as far as to involve an attorney and a private investigator. Thomas glared at me sharply.
"Chloe, what is this all about? I have no idea either. Mom has nothing to do with this, Dad. We're the ones who planned everything.
Hearing these unexpected words from Brian, Thomas's eyes widened even more, and he froze in place. I wondered why Brian would go to such lengths. Then, Brian explained how he came to know about Thomas's affair through a message from Miller. Brian had been talking with Miller and Martin about what he could do without me finding out. But the three of them couldn't find a solution on their own, so Martin talked to his father, who is a lawyer. Even though it was a personal request, Martin's father agreed to help and had a private investigator look into Thomas's surroundings. One of Miller's relatives works at the restaurant where Thomas was meeting his mistress that day. They provided the dinner tickets to stake out Thomas.
I wasn't sure whether to bring Mom along, but I wanted to clear things up. I couldn't stand the thought of you and Dad just pretending to be a couple anymore. I couldn't bear it.
So, that's why Brian invited me here. I thought Brian was still a child. Yet, he had been thinking about his parents this much. I was truly surprised to see how grown-up Brian had become before I knew it. As I was lost in thought, Martin suddenly looked at Thomas and made a shocking statement.
Mr. Jones, my father and his friend found that Aria is actually Mia, who was in the same class as Miller and me in our freshman year.
What? Her name is Aria. It even says so on her business card.
That must be a pseudonym for the club. Don't you remember Mia, who dropped out in December of our freshman year? That's her.
Upon hearing this from Martin, Thomas looked at the woman named Aria.
Aria? You're that girl, Mia, from back then. What are you talking about? Who's Mia? I don't know any Mia.
Aria was desperately denying it, but she seemed to be panicking. Seeing Aria like this, Martin showed us a photo on his phone.
A friend of mine went to the same middle school as Mia, and he showed me the graduation album. I took a photo of Mia's picture with my phone. Look at the large mole under the left eye. Isn't it the same as yours?
Martin pointed at Aria's face. Aria covered the area under her eye with her hand, but it was too late. She gave up and smiled wryly.
If I'm caught, so be it. Yes, I'm Mia, the one who couldn't stand being in Mr. Jones's class during my freshman year of high school. The Mia who was driven out of school because of such an awful homeroom teacher.
The room went silent at Aria's drastic change in demeanor. What was she plotting by getting close to Thomas? As I pondered this, Thomas questioned Aria before I could.
Driven out of school because of me? What do you mean? You probably don't remember. To you, I was just a mere shadow.
Aria began to recount her time back then. She couldn't fit in with the class and was isolated since her first days of school. She also struggled with her studies. She tried to consult with Thomas, her homeroom teacher, who never took her seriously. Although Thomas was well liked by his students, he tended to be favored by the popular ones. So, it was quite possible that, on the flip side, he didn't pay as much attention to the shy, quiet students who didn't stand out. Just as he had been neglecting me at home. I found myself feeling a bit sympathetic towards Aria, even though she was the one Thomas was cheating on me with. Listening to her story, Martin's father placed his hand on her shoulder as she tearfully recounted her high school days.
I understand your pain. But why did you decide to date Mr. Jones without revealing your true identity?
Aria answered, wiping her tears away with her hand.
I wanted to get back at him. I thought making him cheat on his wife would destroy his family. He happened to come to my club as a customer, so I coaxed him into picking me. He didn't know who I was, and I thought if his wife found out he was cheating on her with a girl from the club, she would divorce him.
While I felt sympathy for Aria, I felt that her plan was over the top. Cheating is cheating, no matter the reason. Thomas, who had been close to Aria until moments ago, now looked at her with suspicion.
You played with my feelings for such a reason? What about my feelings?
Thomas exclaimed as if he was the victim. I couldn't stand his self-centered attitude and couldn't keep quiet any longer.
Enough! playing the victim now? Cheating is cheating, isn't it? I've known about it all along.
My sudden outburst caused a stir around us.
What's the matter, Chloe? You're not acting like yourself. I've been keeping it to myself until now. Disappearing every weekend with friends or whatever, and now cheating? I will never forgive you.
I let out all the feelings I had been bottling up inside. Thomas seemed unaffected, showing no signs of remorse.
I was bored at home because you wouldn't talk much. So, I ended up accepting invitations from my colleagues or taking my students out for a drink when they asked me for advice. I'm a teacher, after all. It's not my fault. So what? Both my parents were high school teachers, and they cared for my family. You're just making an excuse. It would have been great if you were a teacher too, but anyway, I felt uncomfortable being with a wife like you with nothing to talk about. So, enough, Dad. You're embarrassing us.
Brian's blow silenced Thomas immediately. Martin's father, witnessing the whole scene, tried to calm Thomas down.
Mr. Jones, I heard from my son and my late wife that you are a good teacher. However, family is irreplaceable. I lost my wife 2 years ago, but you have such a wonderful wife. Please cherish the time with your family from now on.
No, that won't be necessary. Let's end this. I've already talked to my parents, and they said I can come back home anytime.
I felt bad for interrupting the kind words offered to me, but I needed to make my feelings clear. Thomas looked panic-stricken.
What? What about me? I wanted to split up too, but I was deceived by the person I was planning to remarry. Deceived? You were the one lying about your wife and child being dead.
As we were arguing, Martin's father stepped in.
Looks like it would be best to take this to court. Since it was the husband who was having an affair, the wife can claim alimony in the trial. I will also take responsibility and pay the alimony.
Arya, who had been silent until now, seemed to realize the gravity of her actions and offered to pay. Thomas was cornered and had no way out. After the trial, the divorce was finalized. Of course, I was able to claim alimony from Thomas. Arya, or rather, Mia, offered to pay alimony as well, but I declined. I couldn't forgive her for the affair, but she seemed genuinely remorseful. Since Thomas also had a part in her losing her job, I decided to settle things amicably with her. Thomas complained that it was unfair he was the only one paying alimony. He shows zero signs of remorse. Anyway, now that the divorce is finalized, I don't care about Thomas anymore. Later, I heard from Martin and his father that Thomas's affair with a student and our divorce became a rumor throughout the school. The rumor spread quickly among the parents, leading to a flood of complaints to the school. This led to Thomas losing the trust of his students and their parents, forcing him to resign. He tried to find another place to work, but few schools in his area were willing to accept him due to his bad reputation. The only school that offered him a position was located far in the countryside. But Thomas, who had enjoyed popularity, refused, saying he didn't want to be in such an unpopular area. Struggling to find employment and falling behind on rent, he was kicked out of his apartment by the landlord. With nowhere to go, Thomas then attempted to move in with Miller, who was living alone.
Mr. Jones, please don't destroy the respect I had for you. You look pretty pathetic right now.
He was immediately turned away with those words. His current whereabouts are unknown. After the divorce, I moved back to my parents' home for the time being. Brian, having found a job, started living on his own and is now completely independent. My parents wished Brian had lived with them a bit longer, feeling a bit lonely. However, I too will be leaving my parents' home soon. As a matter of fact, I've hit it off with Martin's father since the divorce fiasco, and I'm getting remarried with him. He's a busy lawyer but always makes time for me. I probably won't be lonely anymore. And Brian is very happy for us. I feel like I've been putting up with things in my life for so long. But I've decided to move on from that. Having little work experience, I decided to try something new and became a clerk in my new husband's office. It takes some getting used to at first, but my husband and the rest of the staff are kind enough to give me training for my job. I feel very happy being with someone I love both personally and professionally. Life has become enjoyable for me. Now, it's time to start a new life for me. If you're going to have your ovaries removed, you're not planning to bury a child, right? Since you're no longer needed, can you divorce me? My husband Michael confronted me with divorce papers. What are you talking about? I won't forgive you if this is a joke, in such a situation. Just a few days ago, I was rushed to the hospital with sudden abdominal pain. The diagnosis suggested the possibility of ovarian cancer. And I was admitted for surgery the following day. This is no joke. I've been putting up with this until now. No, the real endurance had been mine. Living with the in-laws and their harassment. Why should I be the one presented with a divorce petition? On the day before my surgery, anger, sadness, despair, a mix of emotions overwhelmed me as I covered my face. Then, to add insult to injury, I heard the voices of the in-laws, Kevin and Stella. A barren woman should quietly step aside. It's shameful for a woman of your age to cling to a younger husband. These 3 years have been a waste of time for Michael. Please disappear from our lives quickly. Their words cut deep into my heart. Fighting back tears, I managed to steady my trembling right hand with my left and furiously signed my name. All right, this makes us complete strangers. With that, Michael pocketed the divorce papers. As he was leaving, Michael said, "Actually, there's a nice girl at work lately. She's young, cute, and healthy. Ah, it was right not to take the ugly genes from an old hag." I was speechless at his cruel words. Little did I know, meeting Michael again 3 years later would turn out to be quite unexpected. My name is Ava. I married Michael, who is 2 years younger, 2 years ago. We met at work when I was 38, and after his persistent pursuit, we got married. Having given up on marriage, I initially refused his advances. There are plenty of younger women out there. I like someone independent and calm like Ava. I might not be able to have children at 38. I don't want children, I want to be with you, Ava. Despite my objections, Michael insisted I was the only one for him, and I set just one condition for our marriage. Just promise me one thing. I'm not obsessed with having children due to my age. Let's not force ourselves to have children. Michael agreed to this condition, and we got married. Michael, who had always lived with his parents, insisted on continuing to do so after our marriage. I'm an only child, and I'll have to take care of my parents eventually. Why not live with my parents from the start? Though living with strangers at this age was daunting, I consented to live with his parents, Kevin and Stella, out of gratitude for marrying a leftover like me. However, I quickly realized this decision was a mistake. Ava will need you to do the shopping, cooking, dishwashing, garbage disposal, and bathroom cleaning. Why was I the only one expected to do so much when there were 4 adults living in the house? I felt uneasy from the start but couldn't voice my concerns. They seemed to think of me as a housekeeper. Ava, I want to eat Odin today. Ava, the entrance is getting dirty, please clean it. Ava, iron my shirts. What kind of life had the 3 of them been leading before I arrived? The in-laws' house wasn't dirty, so someone must have been doing the housework until I came. This realization only added to my frustration. Furthermore, the in-laws were overjoyed at the prospect of their only son getting married and expected a grandchild right away. You're nearly 40, you should start infertility treatments soon. No, we're fine without children. What are you saying? There's no point in marrying if you're not going to have children. The in-laws couldn't understand our choice not to have children.
Well, we're not young anymore, so we decided not to be too nervous about having children,
Michael said, trying to convince his parents at first. But the in-laws were persistent. No matter how much Michael tried to persuade them, the question of when we were going to have a grandchild would resurface after a few days. One day, Michael came into the room, red-faced.
Mom said I should get checked at the hospital because it might be my fault you're not getting pregnant.
Feeling wounded in his male pride, Michael started taking it out on me. It's not my fault, is it? Michael is just hurting himself. Of course, I didn't say it out loud, but my dissatisfaction grew day by day.
We're proving it's your fault we can't have kids. We're going to the doctor.
Eventually, Michael said something like that. However, I had no intention of undergoing fertility treatments, so naturally, I ignored what he said and lied about being too busy with work to escape from my in-laws' house. I'm home. Listen, Mom. The only saving grace was that my parents' house was near my office. Before going home, I'd stop by my parents' house to vent my frustrations. There, my loving parents, Thomas and Olivia, who had already retired and were enjoying their later years, were waiting for me. I wonder how they felt about their daughter, who got married close to 40, exploding with complaints about her in-laws and husband so soon after getting married. At first, I felt sorry for my parents, but they listened to my complaints as if they were a snack to accompany their drinks.
Ava, what's wrong today? We got some nice liquor from the neighbor, let's drink together.
Perhaps it was because my parents took it so lightly that I was able to complain. Why does everyone think marriage equals children? Plus, pregnancy and childbirth are all tough on women. And then to have the husband's parents complain.
People are just set in their ways. Especially as they get older. I'm told I've softened with age.
Dad has mellowed with age, hasn't he? Maybe Michael will turn out like Dad? With time, this situation will probably become a laughing matter. Just like this, my parents always encouraged me. Having my parents on my side always gave me strength, and I was somehow able to continue my marriage. Then one day, on my way home from work, I suddenly felt severe pain in my lower abdomen. What's this pain? Cold sweat broke out due to the pain, and I couldn't stand, sitting down on the sidewalk. I tried to search for my mobile phone to call for help, but my hands were shaking so much from the pain that I couldn't properly search for it. Fortunately, a passerby noticed and called an ambulance for me. At the hospital, after various tests, I was told there was a possibility of ovarian cancer.
Could you contact your family immediately?
Asked by the nurse, I called Michael. It was past 7 p.m., and Michael should have been home, but he didn't answer the phone no matter how many times I tried. Reluctantly, I called Mom.
I'll be there right away. You'll be okay, Ava.
Mom encouraged me and soon arrived at the hospital with Dad. Tears streamed down my face the moment I saw my parents. I wasn't strong enough to face cancer alone after turning 40. Mom gently stroked my back. With my parents, I listened to the doctor about my condition. The right ovary is highly likely to be cancerous. We recommend the removal of both ovaries and the uterus.
Does that mean I won't be able to get pregnant?
Yes. Are you hoping to get pregnant, Ava? I hesitated. Honestly, at 41, I wasn't that desperate to have children. But, given the pressure for children from the in-laws and Michael, I felt a moment of resistance to making my body unable to bear children.
Is there another treatment option if I wanted to get pregnant?
I asked timidly. You have to think about your body first. My parents looked worried. The doctor quietly said to me, there are options, but further tests are needed to see if they're applicable to Ava. My parents were probably surprised I was still concerned about getting pregnant. I was surprised myself. I couldn't quite express my feelings, but the thought of having both of my ovaries and my uterus removed without ever having had children made me feel indescribably empty. Maybe if I don't give up and keep trying, Michael, Kevin, Stella might change their minds about me. That thought crossed my mind. I can't completely give up on getting pregnant. Can you leave one ovary? The doctor looked into my eyes and nodded. I understand how you feel, Ava. However, depending on the progress, there might still be a need to remove everything. As a result of the discussion with the doctor, surgery to remove my right ovary, the site of the tumor, was scheduled for 5 days later. If the tumor was confined to the right ovary, we would see how it goes with the addition of chemotherapy. If there's any spread, you must give up on pregnancy for good, the doctor emphasized, and I nodded firmly. Thankfully, my parents quietly supported me without saying anything about my decision. Mom came to the hospital every day, taking care of me when I was feeling down. Did Michael get in touch? No. He doesn't answer the phone, and he hasn't responded to my messages about being hospitalized. I don't understand what's going on with Michael. My parents were silent, seemingly not having realized how much their daughter's marriage had deteriorated.
Maybe he's just busy. Dad and Mom have plenty of time, so don't worry about things like laundry. Oh, I'll buy your favorite pears later.
Mom tried to keep my spirits up by being cheerfully supportive. I was deeply moved by my parents' warmth. I decided to do my best in the surgery for my parents as well. Just then, Michael and the in-laws entered my hospital room. It was the day before the surgery. I glared at the three of them.
Why are you ignoring my calls and messages?
Michael casually responded. Seems like you've been through a lot. Good job. Expecting him to apologize for not contacting me, I was speechless. Why can he speak so indifferently about his wife undergoing surgery? Anger welled up inside me, and I glared at them even more. Seeing my reaction, the three of them exchanged some words, then looked at me with a disdainful smile.
Leave! I don't want to see your faces!
Unable to hold back, I yelled at them, forgetting we were in a hospital. Then Michael walked up to me and thrust a piece of paper at me. If you're going to have your ovaries removed, you can't have kids, right? Since you're useless to me now, will you divorce me? The paper Michael thrust at me was a divorce petition.
What are you talking about? I won't forgive you for joking about this in such a situation.
It's no joke. I've been putting up with this until now. No, I've been the one putting up with everything. Why should I be the one presented with a divorce petition? On the day before my surgery, anger, sadness, despair, a mix of emotions overwhelmed me as I covered my face. Then, to add insult to injury, the in-laws spoke up. A barren woman should quietly step aside.
It's shameful for a woman of your age to cling to a younger husband. These 3 years have been a waste of Michael's time. Please disappear from our sight quickly.
Their words cut deep into my heart. Choosing a treatment that left open the possibility of pregnancy for their sake now seemed foolish. What is this treatment? Stunned, Michael left the divorce petition and a pen on the bedside table. Just sign your name, and it's all done. Be thankful I'm handling this for you. Saying so, Michael forced a pen into my right hand. I wasn't opposed to divorcing per se. In fact, I couldn't bear the thought of living with the in-laws and enduring their snide remarks until we had a child. But I had endured their tyranny for these 3 years. I endured it because they were family. They must have seen me only as a childbearing machine. The resentment towards the three who didn't offer support but instead presented me with divorce while I was facing surgery was immense. I bit my lip, holding back tears, and with trembling hands supported by my left, I wrote my name.
All right, this makes us complete strangers.
With that, Michael pocketed the divorce petition. The three of them left the room with satisfied looks. At the last moment, Michael turned back and said,
"Actually, there's a nice young girl at work. She's young, cute, and healthy. She doesn't have a single thing in common with you. Ah, I was right not to inherit ugly genes from an old hag."
Glaring at Michael, he said, "Good thing I divorced the old hag," and left with a smirk. The only sound in the quiet room was my sniffles. Michael and his family had pushed me, already overwhelmed by illness and fear, further down into despair. I buried my face in the blanket and cried. After some time, there was a knock at the door. I hurriedly covered my face with the blanket and pretended to be asleep. "Ava, you're sleeping, huh? I peeled some pears for you, eat them later." The voice belonged to Mom, who always entered without knocking. She quietly came in and placed a container of pears on the table. "I'll move all your stuff to our house today. After you're discharged, maybe you can help with the laundry. Oh, and Dad has started cooking. Look forward to Dad's cooking. I'll come back tomorrow morning." As Mom gently stroked the top of my head peeking out from the blanket, she quickly left the hospital room. It seemed like she knew everything without needing to say a word. Perhaps she had overheard the divorce conversation with Michael and the others outside the room. Feeling the infinite kindness and warmth of Mom, I found myself tearing up again. After a good cry, I lifted my face. The pear was cut into bite-sized pieces for easy eating. "Mom, thank you." As I bit into the pear, the smiling faces of my parents came to mind. I need to get better soon to repay Dad and Mom. I decided to work hard on my treatment, with the goal of giving my parents peace of mind. The next day, I underwent surgery to remove my right ovary. It turned out to be cancerous as feared, but fortunately, the left ovary was normal. Next, I would undergo chemotherapy to target the unseen cells. The first round of chemotherapy was tough due to the medication not agreeing with me and the strong side effects. I couldn't eat anything, and as my hair fell out, I could see myself getting thinner. But my parents were always there to encourage me.
"Yesterday, we saw the meteor shower you like. Dad found 5 shooting stars. We made wishes, so you're definitely going to get better."
Thinking about Dad, who normally wouldn't care about shooting stars, getting up in the middle of the night to watch the sky, filled me with a sense of his love and the warmth of family. Thanks to them, I was able to keep a strong resolve to fight for their sake. My hospital stay ended after 6 months, and I switched to outpatient treatment.
If nobody uses it, it just collects dust. It's good that Ava is coming back.
My parents didn't ask about the divorce. They simply brought me home as if it was the most natural thing. I couldn't return to society immediately and spent some time recuperating at home. Supported by my parents, I gradually began to recover my former self. And then, the second year after my surgery began. Before I got sick, I always lazed around on holidays, but after experiencing cancer, I made sure to live a regular, healthy life.
Ah, that was a good walk.
As I finished my usual morning walk and was about to enter the house, the mailman arrived and handed me a delivery. It was a letter with a baby's photo attached. The name on it was surprisingly Michael's. While I was fighting my illness, the man who left me had found happiness and even had the child his in-laws wished for. I wondered what he intended by letting me know this fact. Seeing the letter didn't make me feel good, but Michael was already a stranger to me.
There was no need to waste my nerves on a stranger. I decided to move on. I knew my parents would be upset if they found the New Year's card. So as soon as I entered the house, I tore it up and threw it in the trash, making sure they would never know. I then managed to return to work. Since my parents' house was close to the company, I could commute without overexerting myself.
How was the healthy sandwich?
It was delicious. Thank you as always. Every day, Dad prepared a nutritionally balanced sandwich for me. This touched since this was something he had never done when I lived at home.
Dad, you're really good at cooking. Did you always know how to cook?
I whispered to Mom, who shook her head.
Dad got excited about making Ava's sandwiches. He improved his cooking skills over the last few months.
Watching Dad happily make sandwiches while humming, I could tell he was truly happy to see me well. Parents always give their children unconditional love, no matter their age. I wished I could be a parent who gives unconditional love like them. That thought made me smile. Having one ovary left didn't matter since I was still single. But I needed to stay healthy for my parents. And I promised myself to repay them one day. I have decided once again. Then, one day, Michael and the in-laws suddenly appeared in front of me. They were waiting for me to return from work in front of my parents' house.
Ava.
Michael murmured my name as they all apologized profusely without caring about the onlookers.
I was wrong. I want to start over.
What is he talking about now? Especially since Michael already had a child. I was furious with Michael for his irresponsibility and the in-laws who followed him like fish droppings, apologizing together. As I glared at them silently, Michael began to explain.
I was deceived.
According to Michael, he married the young woman from his workplace right after divorcing me. Because she was already pregnant. Knowing now that he had cheated on me while we were still married made me upset, even after all this time. Then, just like the letter said, they had a son and were supposedly living a happy life until it was discovered that Michael's current wife was having an affair with another man. Michael became suspicious when she always stepped outside to take calls and never let her mobile phone out of her sight. He decided to hire a detective, and that's when he found out. Even more shocking was that the son he believed was his turned out to be the child of his wife's lover. When confronted, his wife casually admitted to the affair and the truth about the child. Laughing, she said,
Obviously, I'd choose his genes over yours. Who would want the genes of an ugly old man like you? That sounds familiar.
I muttered, and Michael hung his head.
I really am sorry. I've only just realized how terribly we treated you.
Following Michael's lead, the in-laws also apologized. We won't say anything about the child anymore. Can't we start over? Dad and Mom are sorry, too. What convenient people they are. After everything they did, I couldn't understand how they had the nerve to appear before me so casually, and I didn't feel like talking to them. Then, alerted by the commotion at the entrance, a man and my parents came out of the house at just the right moment. Guests? What are you doing here? Mom raised her voice upon seeing Michael and the others apologizing in front of me. The man behind my parents was taken aback by Mom's reaction, but then quickly came to my side.
Please stay away from my wife.
Then, my new husband Brian stood protectively in front of me, facing Michael and the others. Michael and his party were dumbfounded.
My wife? What do you mean, Ava? This is a joke, right? Why would you think it's a joke?
I retorted, seizing the moment to fight back. Sorry, but I'm married to him now.
Thanks to you insisting on that divorce, I found someone who loves me for who I am, not as a childbearing machine.
I wrapped my arm around the man beside me to show him off to Michael and the others. He was a colleague from work who had taken on my responsibilities while I was off sick. After returning to work, he helped me manage my workload so I wouldn't overdo it, and gradually, we spent more and more time together.
Being with Ava makes me realize the small joys in life. Will you marry me?
He proposed, accepting me for who I am, and we got married 6 months ago.
Wait, your stomach! Are you pregnant?
At that moment, Michael's mother screamed upon noticing my noticeably larger abdomen. Michael looked at my stomach and frowned deeply at me.
You said you were getting your ovaries removed. Did you lie to me? How low can you get, lying like that? Enjoy playing the victim?
The in-laws joined in, berating me just like before.
Weren't you the ones who demanded a divorce without listening to my side? You wanted children so much, I decided to keep one ovary just in case there was a chance of pregnancy, but you never listened, did you?
Anger from the past surged within me. Feeling my rage, he stroked my back to calm me down.
My wife has endured harsh chemotherapy and is still fighting hard with the remaining ovary. Please, never come near my precious wife again. If you break this promise, we will take legal action.
His firm stance left them with nothing to say, and they backed off.
We thought we'd do you a favor by offering to keep you as a housekeeper since you're alone. Well, suffer through your high-risk pregnancy then.
Michael left with a parting shot, retreating with the in-laws. My parents rushed over to me. Ava, are you all right?
I swear. If they show up again, they won't get off so easily.
My parents, who had seen me through the tough times, were filled with anger. I will always protect you, so please don't worry. His strong words finally eased me and my parents. Later, Mom heard that Michael had also made his new wife live with the in-laws, just like me. I had thought that Michael and his family were completely deceived by his new wife, but it turns out that wasn't entirely the case. They had disregarded me because I couldn't get pregnant, or so they believed. So, I imagined Michael must have been very kind to his pregnant new wife, but it seems that wasn't the case at all. They didn't take care of her despite her pregnancy, making her do household chores and carry heavy things without concern. Some neighbors, seeing her buying groceries for a family of 4 with her large belly, were so worried they helped carry her bags. Of course, the woman who cheated with Michael and bore the child of her affair was also at fault. But no one could make her feel guilty given how much Michael and his parents exploited her. Michael and his parents made their marriage partners live with them as housekeepers twice, only to divorce them shortly after. This bad reputation spread in the neighborhood, and nobody wanted to associate with Michael's family anymore. Still, they continued looking for a wife to take care of them, but as soon as Michael brought a woman home, neighbors would warn her about their reputation. Thanks to this, no woman became their victim again, and the 3 of them now live a meager life under the strange gazes of the neighborhood.
Was their house always full of trash before Ava married in?
No, they kept it fairly clean. I guess without a wife, Stella must manage the household well.
I see.
Mom nodded, understanding. Lately, Stella hasn't been well, probably due to her age. While Michael works, he has to take care of Stella, but with just the 2 men, the house has recently become neglected.
They only have themselves to blame. They have to figure it out as a family of 3, blood-related.
They need to deeply reflect on how they've mistreated their marriage partners.
Mom, I'm home.
Just then, my daughter and husband returned.
Welcome back, we've been waiting. Let's play with Grandma.
Seeing Mom, my daughter rushed into her arms with the brightest smile. My daughter turned 2 this year. When she was born, my husband and parents cried and thanked me. There were times I doubted why I chose to keep one ovary for treatment, feeling guilty towards my quietly supportive parents.
But now, I have no regrets. Because I have such a wonderful family. After giving birth, our family of 3 started living in an apartment close to my parents' house. My parents would come over with extra dishes they made or vegetables they received, always finding reasons to visit. Though I've resigned myself to the fact that having another child at my age is unlikely, my daughter never feels lonely because my parents are always there to play with her, which has been a great help to me.
Grandma's joining us for dinner, right? Is that okay, Ava?
Of course, invite Dad too.
Thank you. Dad said he's bringing some pears from the fridge.
Our ordinary, warm conversations filled the air. Harassment, divorce, illness. I've hit rock bottom at times, but thanks to my parents and my current husband, I'm living happily. And my daughter, who came into my life when I had almost given up on pouring unconditional love like Dad and Mom, has made my life shine brighter.
Mom, here, take this.
My daughter placed an acorn she picked up in the park into my palm.
Wow, thank you. I'll treasure it.
I hugged my daughter. Together as a family, caring for each other, we want to continue cherishing the small joys of life. What is a real family? Is it about being blood related? If that's all it takes to be a family, then I have none. But if someone tells me that's not the case, if there's someone who believes that's not all there is to family, I want to be a family with that person. My name is Melody. At 32, I'm finally getting married and am in the midst of happiness. I met my fiancé Patrick at work, through a certain topic of conversation. After various things, we started dating, and following 2 years of being together, he proposed.
I will definitely make you happy. Let's build a warm family together.
The moment he said that, I couldn't stop crying. I never intended to get married. I, who had no interest in romance, thought my life would be dedicated to my work. Life is unpredictable. But I can't just be swept away by the word marriage. Family meetings, announcements to various people. Meetings with the wedding venue. And looking for a new home. The days are dizzyingly busy, but it's not a burden because I'm happy. Everything is so enjoyable. However, life has its ups and downs. There's always someone to ruin your happy moments. One day, on a rare day off, while I was relaxing at home, I had visitors. It was my brother Benjamin and my sister-in-law Lily. I live in my parents' house, and when Benjamin and Lily came, my parents had just gone out, unfortunately. I wish they had contacted me in advance. They said they were nearby and decided to stop by. Well, this is Benjamin's parents' house, so they're free to come whenever they want. But all I can do is serve coffee, you know?
Just seeing your face, so full of happiness because you're getting married, is enough for me.
Saying that, Benjamin patted my head. What's it like to pat the head of your sister, who's over 30? I sometimes wonder, but no matter the age, Benjamin's gentle and warm hand always brings happiness to my heart. Even when I become a grandmother, I'd like to be patted by those wrinkly old hands. Benjamin, still with few wrinkles on his hands or face, is 35. He just married a young woman 10 years his junior last year. For me, Lily is also much younger. Welcome, Lily. When I greet her like this. Thanks. Lily's response is always quite cold. That's just how she is. While Benjamin and I were talking in the entrance for a bit, Lily promptly entered the house and sprawled out on the living room sofa, as usual. Everything as usual. At first, I was amazed, but if this is Lily's normal, it's not for me to comment. If it bothers anyone, Benjamin will say something, so I keep quiet. But there's one behavior that still concerns me. It was when Benjamin stepped away to the bathroom. Hey, Melody. The moment she calls my name, I brace myself, as usual. To me like that, Lily said. Are you really going to be a housewife after getting married? At the family meeting of me and Patrick's families, I talked about quitting my job to become a housewife, and Lily knew because she was there. That's right. Really? Become unemployed, for real? Unemployed, is that such a strange thing? Being a housewife is hard, too. Our mom is one, and it's an important job, protecting the home. When I say that, she laughs at me as if I'm lecturing or making a joke. That's funny. You probably weren't needed at the company anyway. Becoming unemployed, that's the worst. Lily, you're the same, aren't you? It seems like she looks down on it, but Lily herself is actually a housewife. I come from a wealthy family. I'm the daughter of a company president. It would be strange for someone like me to work, right? Besides, I'm loved by Ben. Ben refers to my brother and Lily's husband, Benjamin. So, is she implying that I'm not loved by my fiancé, Patrick? But that's not the only troubling part. Lily's family runs a business, and she indeed is a president's daughter. I attended the family meeting when Benjamin was getting married. I remember Lily's parents flaunting their flashy jewelry and boasting about their expensive, custom-made suits. But behind the scenes, I know about the complaints of low wages among the employees and the salary cuts for staff while increasing the president's salary. Moreover, Lily, who doesn't actually work, gets paid as an employee. It felt like seeing the dark side of small, family-run businesses. Growing up in such a family, there are many things about Lily that make me wonder where the president's daughter is in her. For starters, stop monopolizing the sofa by sprawling out on it. And what's with rummaging through someone else's fridge and shelves, taking out drinks and snacks? And don't just eat them. That's the chocolate mousse I was hiding. I bought it on my way home from work yesterday and was planning to have it for a snack. I was just helping you not to get any fatter. You should be thankful. Thankful, my foot. I was irritated, but I am the elder one. Getting seriously angry over a younger person's joke would only add to my gray hairs and wrinkles. The best thing is to ignore it. But Lily's audacity doesn't end there. It happened during the crucial wedding dress selection for my wedding. Mom wanted to see it too, so she left work early to meet me, but somehow, Lily was also there. Yikes! An unrefined exclamation slipped from my mouth. I just can't be that tolerant. Sorry, but no. I got married just last year, so I think I can give some good advice. Since you are older, maybe avoid flashy dresses? Maybe just a simple dress would be better? What kind of advice is that? Do you even know the meaning of advice? It's supposed to be helpful. Not at all helpful. I feel like she's out to kill my spirit. For now, ignore Lily, just ignore. If that's impossible, empty my mind. Stay calm, and Lily's presence will become nothing. No way, Melody, a princess line dress wouldn't suit you. That's for young and cute girls like me. Do you even know your age? A mermaid line is a no-go too. It shows the body shape too clearly. That's for someone with a nice body like me. Your figure is just unsightly, you know? And showing your back is a bad idea too. That's for beautiful girls like me to show off their dazzling radiance. Your back would just look gloomy. I can't stay calm anymore. Shut up, you woman. If only I could say, who are you to talk like that? How refreshing that would be. But frankly, it's just too bothersome to argue each point. At first, I casually mentioned it, but she just won't listen. But that doesn't mean I should burst into a fiery rage. It would be bad for the shop staff, and I don't want to ruin the atmosphere. I want to enjoy this. So, I have no choice but to endure. Aiming for emptiness, then giving up, repeating this, I somehow managed to finish choosing the dress. Afterward, the three of us went to a cafe. By then, I was really exhausted. It's great that you found a nice dress, Mom said. I nodded in agreement. The dress was nice, but the person wearing it is a bit iffy, Lily said. Enough. Even Mom frowned at Lily's harsh words. Being mindful of her role as a mother-in-law, Mom rarely argues back with Lily. But perhaps she couldn't bear it any longer. Lily. It's not right to speak about people that way.
She admonished her. In that moment,
"That's terrible. Carol, are you bullying me? I was just trying to be helpful."
and there it was. It's not like that.
After all, Melody isn't your real daughter. Why support her like she's your own blood?
Lily started saying outrageous things. Mom, looking distressed, fell silent. She's an adopted daughter, right? So to me and Ben, she's a complete stranger. A person with no blood relation. I was just tolerating that and giving grateful advice. I was speechless. That's right, I'm not her biological daughter. My biological parents died in an accident when I was young, and my current adoptive parents took me in. They gave me as much love as biological parents. Raised by adoptive parents who treated me like their own daughter. My parents and Benjamin, they definitely consider me family. And she dares to say such things to us. I felt the blood drain from my face. But Lily's tirade didn't stop. I think it's enough that Benjamin married me, a president's daughter. Now might be the time to disown the outsider Melody, right?
We would never do that.
But my dad says it too. It's shameful to have an adult parasite in the family. Having someone like that in our family is a disgrace. So I think it's fine to cut ties with her when she gets married.
How could you say that?
It was rare to see Mom turn red with anger. Looking at me standing there stunned, Lily said, "Well, you'll be leaving this house once you're married. If you're an outsider." I stopped listening after that. I left some money on the table, stood up, and left the cafe. If I had listened to Lily any longer, I'm sure I would have lashed out at her. I didn't want to cause any trouble with Benjamin over something like that. Despite the irritation, the days leading up to the wedding were still busy. As I was resigning from my job, I spent my days handing over work to my colleagues, and before I knew it, the wedding day arrived.
"I'm so nervous."
Patrick, with his gentle smile and reassuring words, stood beside me, trying to calm my racing heart. Today, he becomes my husband. Together, we can overcome anything? Yes. He nodded firmly to my question. I made the right choice. I'm so glad I met him. This was a moment when I was savoring happiness with him. Suddenly, my mobile phone rang. It was Lily. Honestly, I didn't want to answer, but if she's calling at a time like this, it might be something important. Reluctantly, I pressed the call button. "Oh, Melody? Hi, how are you?" "I'm fine, goodbye." I almost hung up on reflex, but I managed to restrain myself. Why does she have to disrupt my mood today? I didn't want to feel irritated on such a day. I calmed myself and asked her calmly, "What's up?" "I'll excuse myself from your wedding today."
"Excuse me?"
I had a feeling it was going to be something absurd, but this was beyond anything I expected. After a long pause in my reply,
Sorry, what did you just say?"
I asked back.
"I said, I'm not going to your wedding today. I realize there's no need to go to a stranger's wedding."
"Stranger? It won't be fun anyway, so why bother going? Plus, why celebrate for a stranger? There's no need, right? So I'm not attending, lol.
"What does Benjamin say?"
No need to ask. Daddy says there's no need to go. I think so too. So from now on, don't treat me like a sister. In fact, don't ever come to see me again. We're strangers, lol. I was speechless. What a thing to say, to think she's family. My anger was rising. Enough. I don't want someone like her at my wedding. I planned my next move and spoke firmly. "Got it, you're not attending. But are you sure? It's going to be tough, just remember that." She probably took my words as sour grapes. Lily's mocking laugh echoed from the other end of the phone. What are you even saying? I have and will continue to have a happy married life. You just live your miserable life in silence, lol. Bye. The call ended. I was about to boil over with anger at Lily's audacity, but seeing Patrick's concerned face calmed me down. I had one thing to do. Determined, I made a call to a certain place. After doing what I needed to, I switched my mindset and walked down the aisle as a happy bride. I enjoyed a wonderful reception, and then I realized, hey, isn't this the best ceremony? Because that awful Lily isn't here. The depressing presence that always had something nasty to say was absent.
It was unexpected how much lighter and happier I felt without Lily there. As the reception neared its end, it was time for the bride and groom to give their thank you speech. The groom, Patrick, stood up, and I moved to stand beside him. At that moment, bang! A loud noise echoed, and the doors of the venue burst open. "What's the meaning of this?" A woman's scream resonated through the hall. It was Lily, her face flushed with anger. She must have rushed here, in her everyday clothes. Panting, with disheveled hair and clothes, she didn't look like a president's daughter. I expected the room to erupt into chaos, but it didn't. Of course, we had anticipated something like this might happen, so we had already explained the situation to the attendees in advance. And then, our prediction came true. I took the microphone from Patrick, who was next to me, and then I said, "What's the matter, Lily? You look so flustered." "What's the matter, you say? What did you do?" Lily's voice was louder than mine through the microphone. Her breathing was erratic. "What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb. Our company suddenly lost major clients who said they'd stop dealing with us. They mentioned it had something to do with you. What's this about?" Oh, that was quicker than I thought. That was my honest reaction. I smiled. "You see, I know various business owners. I told them about the situation with your family's company, that a company run by a family like yours would soon go bankrupt." "How do you know business owners? Aren't you just a clerk?" Time to reveal the truth. My late biological parents, they were fairly prominent business owners. When they passed away, and I was left in shock, all our business partners came forward to support me. "What? So you were a president's daughter?" "It's not a big deal. Just a small company with about 300 employees. 300? Our company only has just over 100. But why were you just a clerk then?" "Someone acted as the president in my place until I became an adult. I couldn't just oust them after I grew up. So I stayed on as a clerk. But now that person is retiring, and my husband Patrick will be the next president. He's been recognized for his abilities." "What? You're going to be a president's wife?" Lily was taken aback. "By the way, your family's company has a big deal with ours, right? Started because you insisted on it, wasn't it? What's going to happen to that?" "Of course, that deal is nearing its contract end too, so no renewal." "What?" Lily's scream echoed throughout the venue. There were chuckles from various places. Lily glared at the attendees, but then she noticed something shocking. "Why are you here?" She was looking at the family section. Yes, there sat my brother, Lily's husband, Benjamin. Benjamin shrugged lightly at Lily's words. "Why?" "Because I'm Melody's brother, but there's no blood relation. You don't need to attend a stranger's wedding. To you, family is only about blood, huh?" he said, looking sad. "I don't think so. Family is certainly about blood relations, but there's so much more to it. I've grown up with Melody and I love her as my family. I've never thought of her as anything but my sister. Melody will always be my dear sister." At that moment Benjamin spoke, tears streamed down my face. I had always struggled since childhood, constantly questioning if I belonged in this family. Every time, my parents and Benjamin reassured me with a smile, "Of course, you do." They'd say, "You're an important part of our family," and hug me. Their comforting hand on my head saved me so many times. As Lily stood dumbfounded, Benjamin continued, "Lily, it's a shame. I never thought you could be so terrible. Sorry, but my love for you has completely cooled off. I can't be married to someone who calls my family strangers." "What, Benjamin, what are you?" "I'm divorcing you." "What? Why? Don't you see the contradiction in what you're saying?" "What? If family is only about blood relations, then you and I are complete strangers, aren't we?" "No, that's different. Marriage is, Lily tried to make excuses, but she couldn't think of anything. Panicking, she fell silent. "That's what your words imply. So I can't stay with you anymore." "I don't want to. We'll discuss the rest through lawyers." "No, wait. I don't want a divorce. No." Lily was desperately clinging to Benjamin. Then Lily's parents arrived, looking frantic. Seeing the influential guests at the reception, their faces turned pale. Apologizing profusely, they dragged Lily out of the venue. Afterward, due to the unexpected chaos, my husband, my parents, and I apologized to the reception guests. "Hang in there." Warm words of encouragement came from the crowd. I was just grateful. Lily and her family faced a living hell afterwards. Who would want to deal with a company that has her? Was the sentiment, leading to many cancelled contracts. Her parents, unable to salvage the situation, even tried to cut ties with their daughter to maintain business relations, but no companies were willing to continue. Finally, Lily's parents retired, and an employee, chosen by the unanimous decision of the clients for their competence, became the new head, saving the company. I was relieved inside. I couldn't forgive Lily and her parents, but the company's employees were innocent. If Lily's parents hadn't stepped down, I would have offered those employees a place at our company. But, to my surprise, Lily's parents resigned with dignity. They planned to live a modest life in the countryside. As for Lily, despite her complaints about the divorce, it was finalized quite easily in the end. Why, you ask? Because a shocking affair came to light. I won't delve into the details, but Lily, who received a generous allowance as a president's daughter, was apparently frolicking with a man she met online while Benjamin was at work. Benjamin, noticing this, had been quietly gathering evidence. He was considering the right moment to bring up the divorce. I feel sorry for Benjamin, but I hope he finds happiness in the future. Lily, divorced by Benjamin and disowned by her parents. She apparently reached out to many acquaintances, but no one responded, and it said she disappeared into the night. Her whereabouts are unknown since then. As for me, I'm living a love-filled newlywed life with Patrick. One day we had this conversation. Shall we go visit the grave soon? I suggested. Yeah. There's so much I want to report to Dad and the others. Patrick replied. My parents and Patrick's parents both perished in the same major accident. We were both shocked to learn of our shared circumstances at work. In fact, that's how Patrick and I first connected. It must have been a bond formed by our parents in heaven. A precious gift of deep love from our parents watching over us from above. And here on earth, our adoptive parents watch over us with love. There's no greater happiness. Family isn't just about blood relations. It's about being tied together by a much stronger bond. Patrick gently took my hand. I grasped his warm hand tightly and smiled. Hey, cruel wife. How many times do I have to tell you? The fork. There's no fork. Are you telling me to eat lunch with my hands? What a ridiculous, cruel wife. After our child was born, my husband started calling me a cruel wife occasionally. Why did I marry this man? I could hardly remember. Before we got married, I thought I liked him because he was kind and considerate. It was often said that women would change after getting married and having children. But I would ask this. What about men who don't change at all even after having kids? Isn't that somehow strange? Fed up with my mounting irritation, I shouted back at my husband on the phone. Shut up! If there's no fork, then eat with your hands. Even a baby can eat with their hands, why can't you? My name is Carol, a 36-year-old office worker. By the way, I am currently on parental leave. Though in a different department, my husband Kent was a colleague at the same company. Kent, a responsible and respected manager, was our team leader. After dating for 3 years, we got married. We were both busy with work, but we spent our days off together and had a reasonably happy life. However, I began to have certain troubles as I got older. When will you guys let me see my grandchild? These were the words of Louis, who is Kent's dad, as my father-in-law. Every time he looked at me and said this, I get sick to my stomach. I don't like Louis, or rather I hate him. He's arrogant and acts so pompous. Louis was a department head in a fairly large company. He may be a man in positions of authority, but I always think that it just at work and doesn't apply at home. I often saw him scolding mother-in-law Deanna. When I told Kent, he said, "My parents have always been like that. They haven't divorced, so it must be working out, right?" He talked about it as if it was none of his business, which made me wonder if this was really okay. We got married when I was 28, but we didn't have children for a while. About 2 years into our marriage,
we started to think it might be difficult to conceive naturally, so we went to the hospital together. The test results revealed there was something wrong with Kent.
What? You mean I'm the cause? Really?
Kent couldn't believe what the doctor said. Even after getting a second opinion at 2 other hospitals, the results were the same.
All I could do was to try to cheer up the disheartened Kent, saying, "The doctor said there's still a chance. I'll do my best too."
Looking back, maybe Kent didn't even like these words from me. After that, we started treatment, which was quite tough. Not only was it physically tough, but it was also mentally taxing.
Every time I passed a pregnant woman with a big belly at the OBGYN, I kept thinking, why can't I have a baby? Every time I saw Louis during this time, he asked repeatedly, "Hasn't my grandchild been born yet?"
Deanna was always kind to me, encouraging me not to worry.
"Dad is such a problem. I've explained to him that I'm the cause, but..."
Ken said in disgust. The treatment was hard, but back then, I hadn't even considered divorcing Kent. Then, when I was 35, I finally conceived our long-awaited baby.
Even Louis was pleased, saying, "Really?
I was starting to give up hope, but now I'll finally be a granddad." His words were excessive, but he seemed happy. Deanna also told me to take care of myself.
What surprised us even more was that I was expecting twins. There was some anxiety about suddenly becoming a mother of 2, but Kent said, "Let me know anything I can do, I'll do anything."
As might be expected of twins, by the time I passed the 6-month mark, my belly was as big as if I was at full term. By then, we knew both were boys.
But there was anxiety as well as joy. This one is growing well, but the other hasn't grown much since last time. The doctor sometimes told me at checkups.
I prepared myself for a smaller birth and prayed for their safe growth every day. Being pregnant with twins, I was able to start my maternity leave early. Kent had been promoted to manager around that time, perhaps in recognition of his hard work. But with his new responsibilities, he started coming home later and using work as an excuse.
"Hey, can't you come home a bit earlier? It's getting hard to move around with my big belly," I said. His response was, "What can I do? It's work. I'll do my best once they're born."
Thankfully, Deanna, who lives nearby, often came to check on me. I always thought Deanna was a quiet person, but she talked a lot when it was just the 2 of us.
"How are you feeling, Carol? I made this because you said it was delicious before. Eat up. And I bought some daily necessities for you. Deanna, you're really a godsend."
Thanks to Deanna, I could lead a calm life during my pregnancy. I'm truly grateful even now. Later, I gave birth to fraternal twin boys via C-section. My eldest son, Rui, was 5 pounds, and my second son, Ray, was 4.5 pounds. Kent and I had already decided on their names together. I was discharged from the hospital after about a week, but the boys couldn't come home due to their low weight. On the day of my discharge, Kent came to pick me up. I was depressed, but he said, "Think of it as a chance to rest for a while. Let's be positive." Frustrated by Kent's off-the-mark comment, my irritation peaked when I got home.
"What is this?"
The house was a mess, the table cluttered with stuff, and the sink overflowed with dishes.
Even Kent realized it was bad and said, "I was going to clean up, but I've been busy with work, and on my days off, I'm too tired and sleep in, and I thought, you're coming back today anyway."
Realizing he expected me to clean up made me more sad than angry.
"Kent, didn't you say you'd step up once the kids were born?"
"Of course, I'll help with anything I can. But the kids are still in the hospital, so I thought it's okay to start helping once they're back,"
he said with a careless laugh. I just told him to look up how to care for someone postpartum and locked myself in the bedroom.
A few minutes later, he quietly opened the door. "Sorry, Carol. I looked up how to care for someone after giving birth. You're right, I shouldn't make you strain yourself.
Rest easy today. Starting tomorrow, you'll just do as much as you can." With a smug face, he left the room. What does he mean by starting tomorrow, you'll just do as much as you can? It seemed Kent still didn't understand the meaning of rest. Perhaps I could have relied on my parents, but my brother and his wife lived there, and their eldest child was a student preparing for exams then. When I told about my pregnancy, that night my sister-in-law messaged, "Are you planning to come to our parents' home after giving birth? Please keep it short if possible, since our eldest son is studying for exams." I might have said the same if I were in her shoes. My mom was supposed to help me after my discharge, but she fractured her leg falling down the stairs the day before I was discharged. Considering Kent's behavior today, he probably won't be of much help. But the next day, my savior appeared.
"Congratulations on your discharge, Carol. When Kent told me you needed help, I wondered what happened. Rely on me for anything," she said.
To me, Deanna seemed like a goddess. Since I needed to breastfeed, Deanna drove me to the hospital every day.
Once I asked Kent to deliver pumped breast milk to the hospital because of feeling unwell, he said. "Me? Impossible, I'll be late for work. I'll tell Mom." And left for work quickly.
Kent always left inconvenient tasks to others. Kent will surely do more once childcare starts, and I need to try harder too. At that time, I still had the energy to think that way. A month after giving birth, my son's discharge was arranged. I was overjoyed at the thought of finally living together. On the day we brought the boys home, Louis visited and said, "This one is quite small, is he okay?" Compared to him, this one looks healthy. He ignored quiet and smaller Ray, only doting on Rui.
"What's with this old man? Enough already."
I prayed the boys wouldn't get attached to Louis. Taking care of twins was far beyond my imagination. Feeding was doubled and they rarely slept at the same time. One of them was always awake. When both cried at the same time, I almost panicked. Deanna came almost every day, and my mom, whose leg was getting better, also visited regularly. Without these two mothers, I might have collapsed.
"Deanna and Mom seem to get along well. We'll take care of Rui and Ray, so you should sleep while you can," they insisted, pushing me into the bedroom.
I managed during the day, but the problem was at night. Kent, who said he'd do his best once the kids were born, hadn't changed. He still came home late, and by the time he arrived, I had finished bathing the babies. The most he did was admire the twins' cute sleeping faces.
"They're so cute."
He often made them wake up by touching their cheeks. When they woke up and cried, the other would join in.
"Hey! They just fell asleep after so much effort. Don't mess it up," I snapped. "You get angry like that again. Carol, you've been too irritable since having the babies. Remember, they can see you," he joked. "Huh. It's your fault."
I became upset as Kent complained and quickly headed for a shower. Kent ate the meals I made whenever he wanted to eat, and took a bath I prepare whenever he wanted to take. And he slept and woke up at his own convenience. Even when the kids cry, he never seems to hear them and remains asleep. It's the same with diaper changing. He does change them if I ask, albeit awkwardly. However, when it's poop, he stubbornly refuses, exclaiming, "Whoa! Carol, come here." Rui pooped, so change his diaper quickly.
What does he mean by doing his best? Is this it? That can't be true, right?
I felt like I wasn't co-parenting with Kent. I would have collapsed if it weren't for Mom and Deanna. When I was pregnant with the twins, I begged Kent many times to take paternity leave. I asked, but it's difficult. "It's a pity, but I'll do my best when I get home from work," he said. And this was the result. Furthermore, Kent told me, "At my company, no man takes parental leave. The wives of my colleagues make lunch every day. Professional moms are different, huh?" Before giving birth, I used to make Kent's lunch every day. I didn't have time for that since the twins came, so he had to buy lunch or eat out. Kent seemed annoyed by this, and I felt his sarcasm. By then, my love for Kent had completely cooled. Could anyone still love their husband in this situation? Maybe it's time for a divorce. He hardly contributes to household chores, just complains. But raising twins alone, that's unsettling. I hesitated to take the step towards divorce, especially with the twins still so small. Meanwhile, the boys grew steadily. Rui remained a bit smaller but eagerly drank both formula and breast milk. By 6 months, they could almost grow to average size. We started weaning. I learned recipes from Mom and Deanna, read books, and tried many things myself. Despite being twins, their food preferences were different, which was fun. Looking at the mushy baby food, Kent said, "Wow, how can they eat this? Looks disgusting." While saying that and feeding our son, I intervened. "Enough. I'll take over." To which he replied, "Why can you only talk to me like that? I'm doing my best in my own way. Carol, you like a cruel wife. Be a little nicer to me, I feel suffocated." His words brought tears to my eyes. Is it my fault? I'm trying hard, aren't I? That night, I thought to myself, maybe I had been too harsh on Kent. I felt a little remorse. To apologize, I made lunch for Ken the next day for the first time in a long time. Kent seemed happy and a little embarrassed. "I made Kent lunch today, he was shyly happy about it," I told Deanna, who was at my house, and she responded, "Thanks for doing that for Kent, but you should let him buy his own lunch. He should be making it himself." We laughed about how Louis would dislike that, and just then, my mobile phone rang. "Maybe it's a thank you call for the lunch?" Excited, I answered. "Where's the fork?" Kent's yelling echoed in my ears. "Sorry, what?" I responded. "Hey, cruel wife. How many times do I have to tell you? The fork. There's no fork in the lunch. Are you telling me to eat with my hands? What a ridiculous cruel wife." As I fell silent, he said to me, "Is this payback for yesterday? You really have a bad attitude. Bring me a fork in 5 minutes." I felt bad about forgetting the fork. But did he need to be told this much? At that moment, I stopped seeing this man as family. Maybe it was too late, even by my own standards. My anger welled up and it reached its peak. Without regard to Deanna being next to me, I shouted, "Shut up! If there's no fork, then eat with your hands. Even a baby can eat with their hands, why can't you?" Perhaps Kent didn't expect such a reaction and said, "We're getting a divorce, that's it with you, the cruel wife. We'll talk when I get home." And hung up. I glanced at Deanna, who had an unexpected reaction. Kent came home very early that night, perhaps finishing work at a normal time. Behind him, Louis and Deanna were there. Louis sat down arrogantly and demanded, "Hey, coffee!" Thinking it was probably the last time I'd see this uncle, I silently made coffee. I've heard most of it from Kent. Aren't you being a bit too selfish? Louis spoke to me arrogantly as usual, laughing at the idea of a housewife being so bossy. I was an office worker, just on parental leave, but I didn't feel like explaining. I said, "Really? I just get so irritated with Kent, who shows no responsibility or awareness as a father after the birth of our children." Louis sighed. Men are like that. I was the same. It can't be helped. You're the reason we couldn't have grandchildren for so long, yet you haven't apologized to our family? Huh? What did this man just say? So that's why he was so harsh on me. Kent looked uneasy next to Louis, who demanded an apology. Really? That's a lie from Kent. The issue lies with your son. I pulled out Kent's medical results and slammed them in front of Louis. Even Louis was taken aback and accused him. "Carol, I'm sorry.
I said those things, but I don't really want a divorce. I apologize for lying about the test results. I just couldn't believe them.
Kent apparently didn't want a divorce. He probably thought bringing Lewis and Deanna would work in his favor. I quietly handed him the divorce papers.
A joke, right? Rui and Ray are still so young. You want to make them poor fatherless children? Better fatherless than with a father like you. You're always lying, Kent. You never change, always saying you'll do your best. When have you done? I'm tired too. Let me be free. And, you think I don't know anything?
Kent looked confused.
A lot of people at your company heard today's call. It's embarrassing. A colleague called me, worried. That's when I heard about the parental leave. You said you didn't need it, all lies. Concerned about me with the twins, Kent's boss had asked to him, "How long will you take for maternity leave?" Despite that, Kent had declined.
It was also revealed that Kent could have left work on time on some days, but he deliberately stayed late. Kent was silent and downcast at my words. Seeing this, Lewis intervened.
Well, men have their own circles.
Supporting that is a wife's role.
You'll understand eventually.
He looked at Deanna as if seeking agreement. Deanna scoffed at Lewis.
That's something I'll never understand, no matter how many years pass.
Lewis was taken aback by her reaction. Ignoring Lewis, Deanna said, "Kent, let Carol go. Make sure to pay proper child support. That's the least you can do." Not expecting this from Deanna, Kent looked helplessly at Lewis. Then, Lewis suggested something outrageous. "If you divorce, leave one child here."
The bigger one, yes, that one.
Pointing at our eldest son, Rui. I was so angry that I almost hit Lewis.
Then Deanna slapped Lewis, shouting, "Enough already!" Lewis was shocked and exclaimed, What have you done? We might as well divorce too."
As if waiting for these words, Deanna said, "Really? Thank you. Then please sign here."
"I've already done."
2 divorce papers were laid out on the table.
The 2 men remained silent and seemed to be thinking, this wasn't supposed to happen.
After Kent yelled at me on the phone, Deanna chuckled and said, "Kent grew up watching Lewis treated women poorly. A foolish husband and a foolish son, pathetic. Carol, I've reached my limit too. The end of a man who can't do anything alone must be ridiculous, don't you think? Let's make them regret it." I felt a bit scared seeing Deanna's face, but realized she must have endured worse treatment for a long time.
Kent and Lewis filled out the divorce papers while saying, "Regret this," and handed them over as if throwing them.
They frustrated me till the end, but Deanna and I were finally free. I returned to my parents' home. My brother's family had moved nearby, so their children could attend a local high school. Deanna, having received her share of the assets, moved close to my parents' home. She's become quite close with my mom and visits her often. The boys are happy, loved by their 2 grandmothers. As for Kent, the fork incident became widely known at work, and he lost respect, especially among female colleagues, being whispered about as a women's enemy. He's unlikely to engage in office romance again. Due to his poor domestic skills, he's been demoted from his manager position, as customers complained about his sloppy, unhygienic appearance. His diet has deteriorated, and he's gained weight. Feeling uncomfortable, he recently requested a transfer. By the time I return from parental leave, Kent won't be at the same company. Similarly, Lewis's personal life suffered. He tried to make this incident a laughing matter with his superiors over drinks, but the room fell silent.
"The way I see it, a man who can't treasure his family isn't worth much,"
the CEO personally told him, so Lewis's remaining months until retirement will be uncomfortable. He'll likely spend his old age alone. Both got what they deserved. Deanna started part-time work at a nearby grocery store and seems to be enjoying her days. I'm happy for her. The twins, Rui and Ray, are about to celebrate their first birthday. A few days ago, the two of them started walking at the same time. I was so moved that I couldn't help but burst into tears.
They have different food preferences, but they like the same toys and are now playfully fighting over them, saying ah. Ah.
Watching them, I vowed to be a strong mother.